Yes, this is Laverne Johnson. There I am. So,
Go ahead.
can you hear me? Laverne Johnson, 306 Evans, Lyons, Colorado. And I want to compliment the board and the town for the beautiful parade. And I want to ask again for the $1,000 for the good old days so the town can go ahead and have their races and car shows. And I want to report that the good old days is going to be revived by the alumni and the Historical Society, and on Saturday, June 25th. And so whatever anybody else wants to do, we'll be glad to have them do it. And I didn't know whether you were short of money or just didn't want to fund that. But if you're short on money, I was suggesting an art and culture tax that would cover a lot of these requests that you've been having. So thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning, can you continue the meeting? The mayor dropped his feed. He's getting back on.
Okay. Are there any other citizens who wish to be heard in audience business? And I would ask Clerk Vasquez to help me and see if she sees any hands raised. I see Chris Cope. So, Mr. Cope. Although, Chris, before you start, let me first say that with regard to the budget, there will be a public hearing during the budget consideration. It's on second reading, so budget-related discussions should probably go to that part of the meeting.
Okay, I'll wait till then. Thank you.
Oh, Mayor Angela's back, so I'll gladly relinquish the controls.
Thank you, sir. Would anybody else wish to address the Board of Trustees at this time? Madam Clerk?
No, sir, I don't see anyone with their hand raised.
All right. Then we'll move on. Sergeant Bill Christ, Boulder County Sheriff's Office report, sir.
All right, good evening, everybody. Just a few things to report. The ongoing graffiti issue that we have in and around the skate park and Bond Park and the bridge is an ongoing case. We do have some pretty good solid leads, so hopefully we'll be wrapping that up here very shortly. And hopefully we will be sending the message that this is not appropriate behavior in our town. We are doing some extra patrols, especially in the early morning hours and evening hours throughout the neighborhoods. I hope people have been seeing my guys and myself patrolling the streets. We're really trying to thwart any potential porch pirates and stolen vehicles and whatnot. So we're trying to make a big presence in that. Today, Division Chief Lance Enholm, after 29 years of service to the Boulder County Sheriff's Office and the citizens of this county, has retired, well-deserved retirement. Commander Jim Chamberlain, who was kind of second in line, has taken over the reins of Division Chief for the operations, which is the entire patrol division. So we're welcoming him aboard. DC Chamberlain is, he works up in Lyons a lot. He does a lot of our extra duty events. He was at the parade. He does a lot of our traffic stuff. So he's well diverse in the Lyons area. So we'll have a lot of good support from him. And I just want to publicly announce, our congratulations to Division Chief Enholm. He's been a cornerstone of the Boulder County Sheriff's Office for a lot of years. He was my first training officer when I came aboard, and he's been a mentor of mine for all those 29 years. So we wish him well. I know that he's going to head up to the mountains and hit the powder because he's a big ski bum now. So that's his plan right away. So the next thing I want to do is tag along on what Laverne Johnson said about the holiday parade. A big shout out. I think it went really well. I want to give some specific kudos to Marissa and Kim, and to Dave and his crew. They always help me out, and they did some extra things for me today or over the parade times. But I also want to give a huge shout out to the town and all the participants, because it was kind of that final hour of getting this thing rolling, and everybody pulled through, and it was a great event. We had no issues on our end, and it was fantastic. I think the new route turned out well. I was a little concerned about it. I was concerned about the recent issues that they had up in Wisconsin. That's one of those things that just kind of always wakes me up at night, and those are the things that I have to think about in keeping the participants and the residents and citizens of Lyons safe during these type of events. So it went off well, and I just want a big shout out to everybody that helped organize it. I don't have anything else to report at this time.
Are there any questions for Sergeant Christ? Seeing none, please stay safe, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Trustee reports, Trustee Rogan.
Thanks, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. I'll echo what everyone else has been saying about the parade, and kudos to staff, to Sergeant Christ, and all the folks who kept us very safe during that. It was a hoot. It was an absolute hoot, and it was just so great to see everybody out in their goofy floats and all the kids, and that was great. So the EBC met. We had DOLA up for their visit, and we talked about sharing resources for design guidelines and historic preservation. So there's a couple meetings coming up soon for that. We got an update on the comp plan and an update on the Colorado Tourism Office Restart Program. So they did a survey, 111 residents responded. Just one quick stat is that 74% of the respondents said that they think tourism is good for the town of Lyons. The HBC did not meet, and I attended the Consortium of Cities meeting last week. It was about equity, and I learned that both Erie and Louisville have diversity, equity, and inclusion citizen boards. So moving forward, at some point, I would like to explore doing the same thing for Lyons. I'm going to go visit a couple of those meetings to kind of see what they're all about. And then finally, I was contacted by the Boulder County NAACP, who's having a really interesting looking program in January around Martin Luther King Day called Walk With Me. So I have that information, and I'm happy to send it out to whoever would like it. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Trustee Rogan. Mayor Pro Tem Browning.
Yeah, I guess I have three things. I think a co-liaison, I guess, with the LAHC, and following up on something that was discussed in the budget process. The LAHC has come up with a draft of a set of protocols for how they would report to the town and approach the town board on major art installation projects in the future. I just saw that for the first time this afternoon, and the draft looked pretty good, but I wanted the board to know that they are working on that and taking that seriously. That also would include an annual report on sources and uses of funds and how they've spent the funds that they've had to date. And so they are working hard on that. I think they're meeting next week. So it's just been done in draft form. It hasn't been actually approved by the LAHC yet, but they're working on it. With regard to the Parks Commission, to which I'm the liaison, unless applications have been received, and I haven't heard of any, we would remind everybody that we have 2 open positions on the Parks Commission. That's an important town commission because, I mean, this town devotes 1 cent of its 3.5-cent sales tax to parks, and parks have always had a very high importance to the voters of Lyons. They look carefully at them and they fund them well. And we spent millions on parks in the flood recovery process. So if somebody really wants to get involved on an important part of town life, I would highly encourage anyone who's interested to apply for one of the Parks Commission vacancies. And then thirdly, relating to another town commission, it's my understanding that a town commission, the Sustainable Futures Commission, sent a position statement on town letterhead to a state agency on behalf of the town of Lyons. That's something that in my view, only the Board of Trustees can do, and that the proper way for a town board or commission is an advisory board or commission to do that would be to come to the board and request that the board approve a position statement to be sent to a state agency. So I would like to see have a future agenda item, and it's not a great rush, but I do think it's important enough to have one about what exactly the SFC did, and also to give some general direction to all town boards and commissions about taking positions on behalf of the town for advisory boards and commissions. I think that's, I think there's a potential issue here that if one board and commission does it, another board and commission may think, oh, we can do it because such and such a commission just did it. And I think a reminder is also needed to some boards and commissions on compliance with open meetings laws. In particular, you can't do group emails outside of board meetings about substantive matters. The town board can't do that. And I know it's more convenient for boards and commissions to do that than have to wait till their next meeting, but you can't do that. Lawsuits get filed on that all the time against municipalities. The attorneys have warned us repeatedly on that. So on both of those respects, in terms of taking a position on behalf of the town and communicating it to some other governmental entity or a private business or whoever, I'd like to see that in a future board agenda item. And also in that same session to reinforce once again what's proper and not proper in terms of outside of meeting discussions among more than two board or commission members at a time. That's my report.
Thank you, sir. Well stated. Trustee Caravas.
Mayor Angelo, may I add to that just quickly?
Always, Counselor.
Thank you so much. So I was not made aware of these issues until you brought up in your report, and I can't say enough how concerning that is, and would strongly reemphasize those words that boards and commissions should not be taking positions on behalf of the town. They're not authorized to do so, and only the Board of Trustees may do so. And I would highly support a workshop with the boards and commissions to reinforce their role at the town as advisory boards and commissions, not as independent actors acting on behalf of the town.
Thank you, Counselor. Trustee Caravas.
Good evening, everybody. The UEB met just last Wednesday. I was hoping Aaron would be here because he had a list of stuff to go on, but I'll try to hit it real quick. Some of it you just saw from the latest email that went out from the town. Longs Peak Drive project sewers complete, working on water line now. Included with that was several new, quite a few more valves were installed in our water system, which will allow future shutoffs of small sections of areas, smaller sections of areas of town to work on should emergencies occur. Let's see. First Avenue, Mountain View, Second Avenue, high flow pressure connections are being made. Valve and C's are in. Final hookup, I believe, was hopefully for the end of this week or end of last week, early this week. And after that, the Welch Court Sewer project will continue. Ramey is in town. You've probably seen some of the big pump trucks roaming around town. I believe they started in Eagle Canyon, worked their way up to Vasquez. I think I just saw them the other day up on Kelling. So they're working their way through north part of town. The Longmont H2O, the water line, the raw water line that we've been told was going to have to be at night. There is a possibility things are being worked on. They may not have to be at night now due to the low traffic problems or the low traffic on Highway 7 because of the construction. So that would be beneficial to our neighbors that they don't have to listen to noise and see bright lights all night long. Let's see. You are aware of Summit. I think we've all seen the email. Summit dollars have been paid into the funds. So that's good. Let's see. Jim Kerr, the chair, and Mayor Angelo went to the meeting. I believe it was just a couple weeks ago. There is, as I mentioned in our previous exec session meeting, Electrical rates probably will go up in 2022 from Maine to us due to a couple issues, one being the YGen 1 generator had a malfunction, basically blew up in Wyoming, which is one of the main sources of our power. So Maine has been buying power on the spot market at very high rates. So very inconvenient for us. Hopefully the repair and that generation will be coming online this week, if not early next week. In addition to that, as I mentioned, the transmission line costs are going to, and are hitting Maine, therefore hitting us. As you go to alternative sources of energy, wind, solar, you have generation capabilities over large swaths of land, many acres, sometimes hundreds of acres. You have to connect that all with transmission lines to get it to your main transmission lines. Whereas if you have a nuclear power plant, a coal power plant, or a gas-fired plant, it's all generated right there in one spot and just goes out from the lines there to all the services. So we'll be seeing those rates probably come along. Hopefully not so much, but due to the high cost of the backup power that with the energy costs that we all are aware of, it kind of couldn't have happened at a worse time for us. So let's see. We got members of, we reviewed the funds with what is actually used, what's being billed, what's coming in. And unfortunately, we seem to have gone backwards on our water. We are missing and losing about 30% of our water. We were at one time way over that, had gotten it down a ways, but we have crept back up. And it looks like, based off the report, we're missing about 25 million gallons of water. So a few 100,000 gallons of working all these lines, flushing the lines, can be expected when the fire department flushes or works with hydrants. Yeah, you can lose some water, but you don't lose millions. So we've got work to do. People on UEB, we have some water experts, and you should only be missing about 10% due to normal leakage. That is why it is very important that we have meters at all our parks, all our government buildings, everything, so that you can actually see if someone's not in a building, water's flowing, and you have a leak, or it helps you determine you have a leak. So there are things we have to work on, and Mr. Kaplan is very aware of it and is working on that. And with the upcoming projects, the town staff and many of you are aware of, if you want to add and do things with buildings, the UEB did pass the resolution unanimously, and I don't know if town staff has it yet, but they will need, let's see how, I don't have the exact writing of it, but they will need engineering reports on all projects, full engineering reports, not just an engineering report that says, hey, I've been told this. It's going to need a full licensed state of Colorado engineer with their stamp and their number indicating what that particular business is wanting to do, what their plans are, what they're going to build, what the plans of, whether it's a expansion of an existing business or a whole new hotel, of what's going to be used in-house, being shipped outside. Because we are finding that some of our water lines, some of our sewer lines may be large in an area of town. For some reason, some decades ago, there was a fix made, and there's a smaller line there. Some of you may have noticed a big hole in the ground over here by Mr. McCain's property outside Town Hall. That was, as the raw water line was going through, that Longmont wants to put through, it cuts right through, or our storm sewer drain cuts right through their line underneath the street, and was never done properly. So there's a big fix that has to go on. And so we are finding those kind of things all over the place. So as we expand the town and increase buildings and capacities of our utilities, these reports are going to be mandated by the UEB, and otherwise they won't sign off on anything moving forward. Thank you very much.
Very comprehensive. Thank you, Trustee Carabas. Trustee Lowell.
Thanks, Mayor. Wow, Trustee Carabas, I'm just stunned. 25 million gallons of water. Is that a monthly figure, or is that an annual figure?
Right now, it's an annual.
It's a lot of water to worry about in these times of drought. The Ecology Board met last week in sort of a emergency session. They're preparing this state noxious weed program grant application. We'll be hearing a presentation from the chairman and the vice chair later on at this meeting. On some good news, I get to see how cement's made at Wednesday's CMEX meeting. We're having a tour of the plant. That should be exciting. And on a more somber note, I'm sad to report that we had a fatality at Lyons Dog Park. A small dog was attacked and killed. This is not the first time it's happened there. The dog park is becoming an increasingly dangerous place for anybody with a small breed dog, which was the push that was made by the Parks and Rec Commission for a small dog park there. In other words, parsing off a section of the park for small dogs in particular. Until that issue is settled budget-wise and determined whether it's a realistic proposal, I would firmly advocate that we put some sort of public awareness out there that people with small breed dogs probably ought not to be bringing them to the dog park. I had talked to Kim Mitchell about maybe some signage that we could put up there. I would also suggest that we put something in the email bulletin that goes out to the town. It's a very, very sad state of affairs over there. The dog that killed the other dog, Animal Control, Boulder County Sheriff's Office Animal Control was notified, the proper steps were taken. There was an offer made, or the Animal Control officer told the person whose dog was killed that the other dog could be put down. To her credit, she said, no, I don't want to cause anybody any more heartache. So it's a serious problem, one that we need to deal with. I don't know what our liability is on that sort of thing, but in the interim, I think we at least ought to put some signage up there alerting people to this issue. That's all I have.
Thank you, Trustee Lowe. Trustee Miller.
Wow, that's really terribly sad. I'm really sorry to hear that. Perhaps we could maybe make some hours for smaller dogs to go or something to that effect. You know, this isn't a discussion about that right now, but I feel like there has to be some solution there. I don't really have anything to report per se. I have a meeting with Housing and Human Services next Monday, is our monthly meeting. And that's it for me. So.
Thank you. Trustee Yuan.
Good evening, everyone. I hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving. I'd also like to echo what's been said before. I thought the parade was fantastic, and it was really nice to see everybody out and about. And I didn't even have to step off of my porch to see most of the float, so it was perfect. With that said, the update that I have from the PCDC, we're going to see several ordinances that were worked on at the previous meeting from that group. And in terms of the comprehensive plan, there was a staff report given on that, but I think the document, and I'm going to just have to look at what it's called here again. The community profile has a version of that has been kind of generated for internal review, and it's really exciting to see all the feedback. I think everyone's very pleased with the amount of feedback and input and participation we've gotten so far in the comprehensive plan. So it's really nice to see some of the first documents coming together, talking about transportation and kind of some of the changes in demographics that have definitely occurred since the last time there was a comp plan written. So it's been a busy group, and we're going to be talking through some of their hard work here later in the meeting tonight. So that's all I have to report.
Thank you, sir. Trustee Lowe, please express my extreme sadness to your neighbor about her dog. If that happened to me, I don't know. what I would do. It's very sad. And I think that Administrator Simonson may have a suggestion later in the meeting to address that. I didn't have any liaison meetings, but they're going to be coming fast and furious in the next couple of weeks. I'd like to put a shout out for the middle school band. They're going to have the first band concert at the brand new auditorium Wednesday at 7 o'clock. So that should be wonderful, both to see the new auditorium and something we've been looking forward to for a long time. And that should be a wonderful evening. I got to go to Nebraska and get an education, both going and coming home from a UEB Chairman Kerr and the members of MEAN, along with a meeting that we had here at Town Hall with Aaron as well. As Trustee Caravas stated, I think we should probably prepare ourselves for a rise in rates because gas has skyrocketed recently, and anytime MEAN has to buy energy on the open market, the price is astronomical. I think that we should prepare ourselves more comprehensively for electric vehicle charging stations because they take an incredible amount of juice. And I think that we should be cognizant of that particular fact. I would like permission from the Board of Trustees to request from me any available alternative energy that may be coming online in the near future. We're not on their list. Gunnison is, so they're ahead of us. Aspen was wealthy enough to pay for it. Glenwood Springs had a unique situation that they were entitled to go 100% renewable. So if the Board of Trustees sees fit, I'd like to at least get us on the list for any available renewable energy and be able to send them a letter. That's what they requested at the meeting at Town Hall. That's all I have to report. In regard to boards and commissions.
Mayor, on that,
Yes,
that we'd send, we wouldn't be committing to anything they offered us. We would simply be on the list that they would inform us when it was available, and then we would decide.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly. Because the reason is, and you're right, Mayor Pro Tem, the reason is it's a little more expensive.
I know.
And so we would have to make a decision in that regard. And I think I think everybody should think about that. And we don't need to make a decision on that right away, but I think it's important to consider that. Mayoral appointments. These are always a pleasure because I get to read these incredible resumes. It blows my mind who lives in Lyons now. I'd like to appoint Gil Sparks to the Lyons Art and Humanities Commission and Sandra Haber to Park and Recs. And we had a discussion this afternoon at the agenda meeting, and you have to make out an application. The code actually says shall, not may. So they need to be made out. And like the Mayor Pro Tem said, an additional important position on the Park and Recs Commission is still open. So hopefully we'll get an additional application before the next meeting. Staff reports.
Evening, everybody. I have a quick short report since we're almost getting to the very end of flood recovery. So I'll start with the Safe Routes to School and the 4th and Evans Tech Bridge. That is currently out to bid, and bids are due back December 14th. And then we also will be hiring a construction manager to assist with that project, and their proposals are due December 22nd. So hopefully we'll be mobilizing for this project by the beginning of the year. The backup power project, the backup power for the ops building, for the public works building, we're still waiting for that generator to be delivered. I believe it's supposed to be delivered this week. And then they'll be able to get that installed before the end of the year. The Eagle Canyon lift station, the backup power for that, that's actually in construction right now. So that will be completed by the end of the year as well. And then the letter of map revision, or the LOMAR, that we'll need for all the work that we've done in and around the stream over the years for the flood mapping. We still need to define a scope of work and budget for that. And I've talked with the town engineer, and we've just decided as soon as we get this Pet Bridge rolling, then we're going to focus on this, and then we'll look for some funding for that project. And then, so that's basically it for flood recovery. There's a few other town projects that our team is managing. The same team is managing, so I'll give you an update on those. The US 36 Broadway improvements project. We awarded that design to Murray Smith, and we just received a notice to proceed from CDOT to start design. So we'll have a scoping meeting with CDOT this Thursday, December 9th. And so that project will be underway for design. The trail extension, we have an RFQ posted for design and right-of-way services, and those proposals are due December 9th as well. So Thursday we'll get some proposals that we can score, and hopefully we'll have something maybe at the next board meeting or the first one in January for an award of contract, and we can start design on that project. And then finally, the Black Bear Hole 2nd Avenue Trailhead project, that's a GoCo funded project. That also is out to bid for construction, and we will have bids back for that on December 14th. And hopefully we'll get mobilized by the end of the year, or the beginning of the year, and start that project as well. So we have a lot of stuff ramping up again. And that's essentially all I have for my staff report, unless there's any questions.
Are there any questions for Tracy? Any cost estimates on the Lawnmower yet?
No, I mean, initially I had a ballpark one. I think it was in the tens of thousands of dollars, but the big question is which projects are going to need a Lawnmower. All of our projects, we did do a no rise on those, but we did find out if you also lower the level of the stream by, I think Victoria could probably speak better to, but I think 3 inches, that also requires a Lawnmower. So, but we've got some mixed information from different people at the same agency. So we really need to sort out which projects need that. But what's included in that is you got to do a lot of surveying, flood modeling, and then you got to pay FEMA to review this data. So I'm just trying to get first a solid list of projects that need the Lawnmower, And then I think we can put a cost to each of those projects, and then we can come up with an overall budget. So,
And is our strategy going to be to apply for a grant for those funds?
yes, so probably something like CWCB. We've already talked to CDBG and DOLA in the past. They didn't really think they had anything that fit, but we'll still circle back with them again and see if they have anything new available since the last time we talked to them. So we'll definitely be outreaching to all different agencies and see if anybody has any funding that will fit for this.
Thanks, Tracy.
You're welcome.
Any further questions for Tracy? Administrators report.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to start with my COVID update date that just to keep track of all of this in our public record. As the board is and the community is probably very much aware, we have a new variant. And I will not pronounce this according to the Greek language, but Omicron. But say it correctly, Mayor. You're muted. But we do have our first reported case of a new variant has arrived in Colorado. It's apparently cases are being found nationwide right now. So we're not doing anything different regarding it. We need to continue with the same precautions we have been until they know more about how this variant spreads and its severity. In regard to Boulder County, we remain in what they call high transmission red zone, meaning that our cases are still well above where they were a year ago, actually. And I want to report that we now have had a total of 308 deaths in Boulder County. So that number continues to rise. That's all I'm going to do on COVID for right now. I think people know vaccines are now widely available and available through vaccines.gov for folks to sign up for a vaccination if they're wanting to do that. We did go into stage 1 fire restrictions on November 30th. Therefore, the fireworks were discontinued for our Parade of Lights. We were hoping maybe we could do something unique this year with New Year's Eve or Valentine's Day or something, but I think we're going to have to just play it week by week at this point. May have to forego those until we get some more moisture. As Trustee Caravas reported, Summit Housing has closed on their financing and they have paid their fees and utility taps for the project. So the next phase is for them to secure their performance bond for the public improvements, and they will start those first. So phase 1 will be all the public improvements involving the road grading, the installation of the public utilities prior to starting any of the private improvements. They are planning to mobilize this week. So we will be seeing activity out there. We have seen some erosion fences going up along Carter, one of the entrances to Carter Drive, but we do expect to see some activity out there this week. As the board should know that the Yoder show cause hearing is to be held tomorrow. So staff have been prepped and planning to address that situation tomorrow. We'll see where that goes. Update on the Lyons Hotel. All I'm going to mention, since this is a quasi-judicial matter for the board, is that we have received their development plan application. We do plan for it to go to the Planning Commission in December and to the Board of Trustees in January. That's our current schedule. In the meantime, you should refrain from discussing this with members of the public and amongst yourself, as you will have receive a formal application, complete application recommendation in January. In my report, I also mentioned we've been contacted by Arnold Turner, who's a water broker, that there are 11 in my report it was 3, but today it's been updated. There are 11 Lake McIntosh water shares available right now through his office. So if the board has any interest in acquiring any more of those shares for our portfolio, they are available. for approximately $10,500. So if anyone is interested in pursuing that, we should add it as a future agenda item to pursue. Martin parcel and the road are in the Hall Ranch or Heil Ranch connection. We did hear back from Boulder County that their staff have started working on that assessment at your last meeting, and they plan to have a memo to the Board of Trustees by the end of December on the results of that assessment. And my guess is if weather holds out, and depending on the results of that, we may still have our on-site tour. We'll see. If it stays this mild, we certainly could do it. I heard on Thursday last week that we are now the recipient of a third round of CARES Act funding. This is what was called CVRF. The board will recall that the staff had, for the past few years, has put in funds for an electronic card reading system for our pipe water, and it keeps getting bumped due to other priorities. They have notified us that we have been awarded that. We've been awarded $35,000 to be able to make that into an electric pipe water system so that our neighbors out in the country can get municipal water 24/7 instead of only when town hall is open, and should allow for a better accountability of that water as well, since it will just turn off when those numbers of gallons have been reached. They feel that this is a good pandemic project, since our staff are exposed to dozens of people who come in every day face to face with them to make that water transaction. This will reduce that, and also offers clean drinking water for our rural neighbors that they don't have available. So it'll be $35,000 toward that project if we can get it bid and ordered by the end of December. So this is more of that turn back money, and we have to spend it under their timeframes or we don't get it. They also awarded $7,000 to reimburse the town for our cost for all the different COVID signage over the past couple of years in the parks, all the little, the signs there, any printing cost. So those will get reimbursed as well. So as long as we can get that turned around in the next 3 weeks, we have an additional $45,000 available to us. Finance Director Eystone also put in, just because we didn't want to wait for the next meeting, she did put in the November sales tax numbers. She will be on here shortly with the budget presentation. Sales tax continues to remain strong. This is not the financial update, so I don't have the breakdown today of local versus not, but we wanted to show the board that it is continuing on a strong trend at this point. And then last but not least, of course, we have also included the December newsletter that'll be in the next utility bill with reminders about capital improvement projects coming up, the RV parking ordinance, town hall closures over the holidays, and different rec programs that will be offered. So be sure to take a look at that. And are there any questions for me from the last 3 weeks?
About the grant money from the Shoal Foundation.
Oh,
Do you have
that's a separate
discussion
line.
on that?
Oh, that's a separate board meet. That's a general business item tonight.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Mayor Pro Tem.
Administrator Simonson, in your report, you mentioned that Boulder County, as they had promised to do before, is going to work on a survey of the
Martin
parcel property and also the County Road 69 access to that parcel. I guess I had a question. When Boulder County deeded that property to the town, what type of legal description or survey was done at that time? And I mean, did we get a meets and bounds description so that we kind of know where that property, where the boundaries are?
We did actually get a description. Unfortunately, it was not like a new survey. It was the original survey that was with the plat. And the river has moved dramatically to the I don't know if that's south or east right there, since that time. So we do have a basic description, but unfortunately, it doesn't meet the current land conditions. So they're going to resurvey that access to see how wide it is adjacent to actual Road 69.
Okay,
Because it used to be fairly significant, but the river is impeding on that parcel more than it was at the time of the survey.
that's kind of strange because I remember getting the CDOT report that the river had moved the other way when they were talking about whether to redo the trail that was wiped out. The river had moved in the other direction and left less land there and more land on the Martin parcel side. So I'm not.
That's why they have agreed that they will finance an updated survey of that parcel for us. They just said they're backed up as everybody else. They have not enough staff and more projects. So it's in their queue to do that, but I don't have results yet. It could also be that it widened both ways like we did in some areas. So I'm really interested to see the results of that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any further questions? Legal update, Counselor?
Thank you, Mayor Angela. Very short this week. First, Victoria already spoke about the show cause hearing for the Benita Yoda matter, which will be tomorrow. And so our next meeting, we'll have a report on how that went and what the results are. The interesting development is the bank is getting involved now through a third party, which is, I think, a positive development and getting that situation resolved, hopefully. And so we'll, of course, have more report back at the next meeting. Other than that, nothing of major importance to report. Mr. Freisig continues to make good payments on the settlement, which includes our attorney's fees and damages. So that's always great news. And other than that, I do not have anything to report.
Thank you, Counselor. I'd like you to refresh my memory in regard to the next two resolutions. Do we just take public comment?
I think we need a staff presentation first, presenting the budget,
Okay.
questions on the budget, then a
Okay.
public hearing, and then we go through each of the resolutions.
All right, that's fine. Then Madam Clerk, could you please read the next item into the record?
Yes, the next item is Resolution 2021-124, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, summarizing revenues and expenditures for each fund and adopting a budget for the Town of Lyons, Colorado for the calendar year 2022.
Staff?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. Back in October, the Board of Trustees received a draft of the 2022 proposed budget. Since that time, there have been 3 budget workshops where staff discussed the budget and the board was able to ask questions and address comments. Since those workshops, there have been a few changes and additions, which are highlighted in red font in the updated budget details section of the proposed 2022 budget. These changes are detailed out in the staff memo, which I will summarize. Since the board received their first draft, we have added a net of $32,000 to convert contractual code compliance services to a full-time position. We have increased professional services by $27,000 in the general fund for a human resources consultant. The general fund also increased by $30,125 for various boards and commission requests that were not previously included in the proposed budget. Wildfire mitigation efforts costs were added for $100,000, which is split 50-50 between the general fund and the Parks and Recreation Fund. The general fund also increased by $5,000 for additional outdoor cameras at the request of the Sheriff's Office. Street maintenance expenses increased by $13,000 for streetlight dimming capabilities. The decreased revenue in the general fund by $48,600 and decreased expenses by $28,000 And these numbers were based on updated transportation proposals received from Boulder County to cover RTD services, Z-Trips, and the EcoPass program. So this would bring the town's net cost for public transportation services to $22,000. We also increased debt expenses for 2022 in the electric fund due to electing not to pay off the 2006 bonds early. We increased salaries, payroll taxes, and retirement for a total of $7,244. And these are allocated to various funds due to corrections and adjustments to staff fund allocations and the number of hours. Increased electric fund expenses by $3,000 to accommodate increased engineering costs. Decreased revenues in the water and sanitation fund by $30,000, and this was due to refined sanitation fee projections provided by Aaron. Increase in expenses in the water and sanitation fund by $60,000 for increased legal services. Decrease capital improvement expenditures in the water and sanitation fund to remove the card reader for $40,000 and allocate a portion of the wastewater treatment plant re-rating project to the grant fund for ARPA funding in the amount of $125,000. Increased expenses in the stormwater fund by $5,000 to add an engineering and legal budget. And last, increased revenues and expenditures in the capital projects fund by $300,000 due to the increased transfer from the general fund to that capital fund and the projected use of those funds for street maintenance projects. Additionally, I would like to note that the town is projected to meet the 3-month reserves in all of the funds with these changes that were made. And with that, I will open it up for any questions.
Are there any questions for Finance Director Eystone? Trustee Caravas.
Thank you, Casey, for your report. My notes on our November 9th budget meeting indicated we all agreed to $125,000 to be split 50-50 fire mitigation. What happened to the other 25?
So I had the range of 100 to 125,000, and because we were splitting it 50-50, I elected for the 100,000 just because, as you might remember, we had about 600,000 projected in overage for the general fund. Right now we're projected at, with all of these changes, at $20,000. So we went from 600,000 to $20,000. So I was just trying to keep a little bit of a cushion there in the general fund.
Did that your cushion concur with the, and I may have been reading some of the sales tax projections wrong, because it doesn't look like we fully adjust for how high they are. And it looks like there's plenty from what I could see. Others can tell me otherwise, that there's more than enough in the higher than expected receipts of the sales tax dollars coming in this year and probably projected for next year.
Those do take into account those increased projections for this year and for next year.
Okay.
Further questions? Mayor Pro Tem Brannan.
Yeah, I had the same questions as Trustee Caravas. What you're saying is that the greater than anticipated sales taxes that we've received, and including those that are included in the administrator's report tonight, they are included in those projected year-end fund balances?
That is correct.
Because, okay, I was looking on page 16 of the budget, and it's got sales tax projection to 12/31/21, and it's got the figure of $1,113,000 there. This is on line 01-10-3002 on page 16, and
Yes.
we're already at $1,000,002 something, and with 3 months to go. So, is it just not shown on that page, but it's included in the projections elsewhere, or what?
No, the $1.1 million is for calendar year 2022. or 2021, I'm sorry.
Right, but we've already collected $1.2 million and some odd based on what's in the administrator's report for 2021. So we're going to be at like $1.4 million, $1.5 million for 2021 instead of $1.1 million. So
some of those numbers are based on the accrual that has been done where we're 2 months in arrears. So like the first 2 months that were provided in that chart are actually should have been accrued back to 2020. They were not this year. And so we're taking a different approach on that based on direction from and recommendations from the auditor. So those numbers do take into account those changes. And I do believe that we will be fairly close to that 1.1. And if we're not, and should we come in higher, which would be great, we can always take that fund balance that, and a lot of times you don't always spend all that you're projecting in expenses either. So you often end up with a higher fund balance at the end of the year than you're projecting. So should that happen, this is, a more conservative approach. Should that happen, we can always do a rollover budget amendment and opt to allocate some of those remaining fund balances that were over what is projected.
okay, few other questions. Is there a breakdown somewhere of the $30,125 in boarding commission requests? I think there was a proposal on that in one of the earlier budget packets, and maybe that just reflects the decisions we made on that. So
yeah, you're correct, it does. So the first budget packet included all of those boards and commissions requests. And so these are the ones that were decided upon in prior workshops. And so the ones that are included here are the ones that were not already included in the budget.
okay. Another question that I just thought of tonight, the water wastewater fund was the one that we were most concerned initially about potentially not meeting the 3 months reserves, but now the projection is that it will. Part of that, I gather, is the decision to use some of the ARP money to pay some expenses that were going to be paid from that fund. Is that right?
That is absolutely correct.
And then we were informed tonight that I think I heard the figure $35,000 for the card reader. That was a projected capital expense in 2022 out of that fund. So if that's paid for by the CARES Act, I think it was, grant, that's been added to the balance of the projected balance in 2022 of the water wastewater fund, correct?
Yes, we removed the card reader before we found out for the water and sewer fund paying for that.
Okay.
With the anticipation that it could be used with CARES Act funding. So it'll be funded out of a different fund where the grant funds will come in.
So that improved the water wastewater fund projected balance by 35,000. Which is good.
That's correct.
We needed help in that fund. And I guess my last question at the moment is, as I read it, the projected source at the moment in this budget for the $60,600 match for the Broadway project is the general fund, correct?
That's correct. At this time, that's where the projected funds are at.
If this board did, as has been discussed preliminarily a couple of times, I don't think we've actually formally voted on it. If we requested the Urban Renewal Authority to use available funds, I know they'll need some for projected expenses in 2022, but if, for example, I'm picking a figure, if we use $40,000, if we requested the URA board to use $40,000 of their funds to do part of the Broadway match, that would up the projected balance in the general fund by $40,000, right?
That is correct.
So if we did that and we had a $60,000 projected excess above the 3-month reserves, that would leave us enough to fund the general funds portion of the additional fire mitigation money, correct?
Absolutely. Yes. And we can easily make those adjustments with budget amendments as well.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Further questions? Finance Director Eystone, because I don't know, I would just like an answer to this. Is 33% of our funds for personnel normal? Is that a normal percentage in a municipality?
And I think this depends on the municipality and what services they offer. With some municipalities that have police, forest, fire, their percentage is typically a lot higher than that. But I would say for what we're doing here in the town, it seems fairly in line with what's been done in the past.
Okay. All right. Any further questions? No further questions? This is a public hearing. I'll open up the public hearing. Would anybody in the public wish to address the Board of Trustees at this time?
Oh, this is Laverne.
Go ahead.
I guess,
Your address, Mrs. Johnson?
06 Evans, Lyons.
Thank you.
I guess I spoke out of turn.
Go ahead.
But we're asking for $1,000 for good old days. And that's for the townspeople, for car show and some of those things during the good old days, because we revised it to June 25th, and we're going to have alumni doings and history at the museum. So, and if you don't fund that, then they can't work, and maybe we can get somebody else to do those things. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else wish to address the Board of Trustees at this time? Chris Cope, your name and address for the record, sir?
Chris Cope, 340 Vasquez Road. I wanted to address the situation at the dog park that we talked about earlier. I'm speaking to you as a private citizen and not as a member of the PRC, because we have not been able to meet and talk about these things. Earlier in the year, we did some fleshing out of a proposal to partition the 10 acres into a 3-acre section for small dogs. And that proposal at the time was coming out around $45,000. It was partially because of increased labor rates and lumber prices and things like that associated with supply lines, pandemic. It really, just due to the cost, it wasn't on the top of our list compared to some of the other priorities in the Parks Fund. But given sort of increased urgency, I think, on this matter, I would ask the BOT to consider maybe partitioning this proposal up into something, maybe a smaller start. I think we could do the posts and rails, concrete install, and a second gate for somewhere around $25,000. That could be sort of phase 1 of the project. We could add a second shelter and a water supply later to sort of fit them out with equal amenities. I looked at the parks budget and see 2022 estimates a budget of a cash remaining of around $200,000 after reserves. So I would ask the Board of Trustees to consider taking this into account and possibly squeezing this in for 2022. And the PRC will meet as soon as we can. Next week we're meeting to formalize something. But and also I think we should consider some other things that might improve safety in that area. Signage is definitely important. Possibly increased enforcement. I think our parks, they cost a lot of money. They have, a lot of tax income. And they've been subject to, some bad actors in various areas, and maybe funding a park ranger is something we should consider. And also, I think, I don't want to single out a nearby municipality that might be responsible for some of these incidents at the dog park, but maybe we want to consider restricting access to the dog park to residents, or at least people who have, not residents, but people who have paid the town, or registered their dogs with the town, no matter where they live. But that's it. Thank you very much for your time and service, trustees.
Thank you very much, sir. Would anybody else in the public wish to address the Board of Trustees at this time? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and open it up for comments from the Board of Trustees.
Do we need a motion to approve the resolution to start it, or?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
I would move that we approve the resolution 2021-124, a resolution summarizing revenues and expenses and adopting a budget for the town for the calendar year 2022.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion, comments?
I would
Go ahead, Mayor Pro
make a
Tem.
motion to amend the budget in the manner that Mr. Cope requested, and add a $25,000 capital project to the Parks Fund budget to do fencing and gates for a small dog area. So that's the motion for a budget amendment.
Would second that.
We have a motion in 2 seconds. Any discussion?
As Mr. Cope said, this potential project was discussed a couple of different times earlier this year by the PRC. And although they never actually formally voted on this particular project, I didn't hear any discussion as the PRC liaison that was opposed to this. It was simply a matter of getting the logistics figured out. Lumber prices at the time were skyrocketing and were very uncertain. There was some discussion back and forth of whether it could be done in another part of the park. And it basically, my summary of their discussion was, this is something we want to do, but we're not ready to finalize the details now. So let's just go ahead and throw it on the list of potential future projects. But because of some of the uncertainties, it wasn't put up at a top priority. But the cost estimates at that time were $25,000 to basically add fencing and a separate gate, entrance gate for a 3-acre portion on the southeast portion, I believe, of the dog park. And then another roughly $25,000 to extend a water line and build a shelter later as part of basically phase 2. But I think with a projected $192,000 excess balance in the parks fund above the 3-month reserves, which is what's shown in the budget projections, that a $25,000 item for the year 2022 is not too much to put in there. And it is, I understand, based on estimates. And if an estimate comes in slightly higher than that, then I think the magnitude of that project is such that if it's 10% over or whatever, that it could be taken care of. But I do think there is some urgency to this, and particularly in light of recent events. So that's why I made the motion.
Further comments? Trustee Rogan.
I agree that I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Browning. I would like to see this. It is tragic that it's taken a death to make this happen. I asked about it first in 2018 after my dog was attacked. I do think that we need to think about enforcement. I think that, you build it, they will come, and we just need a way to enforce whatever rules we're going to make about it, because otherwise we're going to find ourselves in the same situation. So, and I also would like to say that I support allocating the money for this. I think we need to take a closer look, maybe it's PRC and maybe it's Director Cosgrove, at how much space is actually needed for the small dogs. It may be less than 3 acres. Their legs are little, So, and that may go over a little bit better with the public, who some folks might really not like having some of their acreage taken away. So I'd like to leave the details up to Director Cosgrove and the PRC, but I support allocating the money for this.
Further comments? Go ahead, sir.
I also support this. I would also suggest what the dollar amounts that Mr. Cope came up with for $25,000 for a smaller park, as originally discussed by the PRC, $45,000 for a larger park. However, labor costs, as a former chair of the Lyons Volunteers for 6 years, there were many summers that a couple football teams, coaches for Unity projects, were looking for work for the football players. One of those teams was Lyons, and there was a team from Longmont. So maybe Mr. Cosgrove, the PRC, with the help or in coalition with some of the remaining members of the Lyons Volunteers, pitting a digging fence hole post competition between 2 football teams who can dig the most posts, get them planted, and get them set in concrete, would be a great team building. And we might be able to actually get a space that's perfect for 2.5, 3 acres at a lower cost, because the labor's free. Well, it wouldn't be free, because you probably have to provide a lot of Gatorade and a lot of extra food, because they do eat a lot, but that's just it. But I think we can go for this if we can get the labor at almost free. It would be great to help go a long way and get the project done this summer.
Any further comments? I'm so glad that I just can't cope with that a dog was killed. So I'm so glad that the Mayor Pro Tem brought this up. And Administrator Simonson will also let us know that if we so choose, we have the option of utilizing a grant later in the meeting. So I can't wait to get this done. We have a motion and a second on the floor. I'll call for the vote.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Caravas,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Yay.
Trustee Waugh,
Aye.
and Trustee Rogan.
Aye.
The amendment passes unanimously. Now we'll vote on Resolution 2021-124 as amended. Any comments, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, I have a further amendment.
I'm sorry, sir. Go ahead.
And that is that we amend the budget to decrease the amount to be transferred from the general fund for the Broadway match to $20,000 from $60,600. I guess we're just voting on the budget here, but I would further move that be conditioned upon a request to the URA board to budget $40,000 for of URA funds for the Broadway match.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
The URA was created in 2015, began functioning in 2016. That's 6 years ago. The URA has never spent one dime on an actual tangible project in Lyons. Most of its funds have been spent on professional fees of one sort or another. All of the money in the URA has come and will still come in 2022 from the downtown commercial areas. URA area has not been formed yet and don't know if it will ever be formed. Residential properties don't contribute to the URA. It's only commercial properties. There are government properties in it, but they're non-taxable. I think it is high time that if we have a URA and continue to have a URA, that some tangible results be realized after 6 years from that. And I cannot think of a better use of funds in the URA than to pay for a Broadway improvement project that one of its features will be to add a significant number of parking places to downtown Lyons to benefit the very downtown Lyons businesses that contribute the tax money into the URA. So I think it is time to do that. And I don't think the town, because when you pay for it from the general fund, those funds come from sales taxes, partly paid by Lyons residents, partly by out-of-town visitors and that type of thing. But the URA property tax money comes from downtown businesses, and it's time that we return some of that money from the URA and put it to a use that will benefit the businesses that pay the taxes. And so that's why I proposed this change in the budget. And I realize that it will take URA action. If the URA for any reason says no, then we can revisit this. But this will free up enough money to deal with the fire mitigation measures that we had proposed. And that's not part of this motion. This is simply decreasing that item in the budget.
Further comments? Go ahead, sir.
I again agree. The URA was set to benefit the town of Lyons, mainly the businesses, help things go for them. And I'll use the opportunity to once again say, with a partial collapse and clogging of our culvert that sits underneath Broadway, it drains into the river and collecting all the water from way many hundreds and hundreds of feet up, even up in Boulder County property. This is very important for all those businesses on Broadway and in Main Street. And of course, the added parking for them is beneficial. I think we saw that this weekend with parade, great weather, with many visitors in the town. This is what the UR money is for, is to benefit all those businesses. And if we can benefit them all and their businesses do increase, that only provides more money to the fund faster.
Further comments, Trustee Lowe?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with Trustee Caravis and Mayor Pro Tem Browning. For a year and a half, I've been trying to wrap my head around the URA and to understand what we do in the URA. We've got a hotel that's going in without any assistance, financial or otherwise, from the URA. We've had a number of businesses in the downtown area that have been revamped or considering revamping. URA's never been involved. It looks like a figurehead to me. So I think this money is best used for the purposes that Mayor Pro Tem Browning describes.
Further comments? Trustee Wong.
I'll just add that I support this, and I think it's a great suggestion.
Further comments? Just the whole purpose of creating the URA was improvements to the downtown area. So I agree wholeheartedly as well. Any further comments?
Let's just vote.
Seeing none, I'll call for the vote.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Rogan,
Aye.
Trustee Waugh,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Yay.
Trustee Caravas.
The amendment passes unanimously. I won't make the same mistake again. Are there any further amendments? Mayor Pro Tem Browning.
Yes, I move that we increase the contribution from the general fund to fire mitigation measures from $50,000 to $75,000.
I'll second that.
Comments?
This would get the funding for fire mitigation back to the $125,000 that we voted on and still leave some excess reserves in the general fund.
Any further comments? If not, I'll call for the vote, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Caravas,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Yay.
Trustee Waugh,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Rogan.
Aye.
The amendment passes unanimously. Are there any further amendments? Seeing none, we'll vote on a resolution 2021-124 as amended. Madam Clerk?
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Rogan,
Aye.
Trustee Waugh,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Yay.
Trustee Caravas.
Aye.
Resolution 2021-121 passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, would you please read the next item into the record?
Yes, Resolution 2021-125, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, appropriating sums of money to the various funds in the amount and for the purpose is set forth below for the Town of Lyons, Colorado for the 2022 budget year.
Staff report.
This resolution just appropriates the sums of money that were detailed out in the proposed budget. However, we would need to make the same amendments to this resolution as we did with the last.
Can we do that in one motion, Counselor?
I think so. So long as everyone agrees on what those are, I think we can say make the same amendments as reflected in those two resolution 121, 124. If there's any disagreement as to what we did in that previous one, then we'd have to do them one by one.
Okay, there were no disagreements, so we could do that. Let's see, are there any other questions? No other questions? This is also a public hearing, so I'll open the public meeting for public comment. Anybody in the public wish to address the Board of Trustees in regard to this resolution? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion. And hopefully it can be stated accurately. Mayor Pro Tem, I'll leave it up to you.
I move the adoption of resolution 2021-125, appropriating sums of money for the various funds in the amounts and purposes as set forth in the draft, subject to the amendments that were made with respect to resolution 2021-124, also being reflected in the final language of resolution 2021-25. And I would include in that motion authorizing the town attorney and town staff to make appropriate changes in 2021-125 to reflect the votes on 2021-124.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second as stated by the Mayor Pro Tem. Are there any further comments? If not, I'll call for the vote, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Waugh,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Yay.
Trustee Rogan,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Caravas.
Aye.
Resolution 2021-125 passes unanimously as amended and stated by the Mayor Pro Tem. Could you please read the next item into the record, Madam Clerk?
Yes, this is the second reading, a public hearing on Ordinance 1111, an ordinance of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, levying general property taxes for the 2022 budget year.
Staff report.
Ordinance 1111 has not changed since our first reading. This ordinance will set the property tax mill at 16.778 mils for 2022. This will give the Town of Lyons taxpayers a temporary tax credit of 2.744 mils and will produce revenue in the amount of $806,462. And that concludes my summary.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Finance Director Eston?
I have one.
Trustee Caravas.
Again, thanks, Casey. Question I have is on the 5.5% limit we're allowed, and then our mills, the current mills we have set, we've gone any higher, or are we at the 5.5% limit with what the mills are set at in this amendment or in this ordinance?
We are at the 5.5% limit.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure so everybody knew that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Further questions? This is a public hearing. It's the second reading. I'll open the public hearing for any public discussion. Anybody in the public wish to address the Board of Trustees on this item? Madam Clerk?
I don't see anyone with their hand raised, sir.
Thank you very much. I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion. Mayor Pro Tem.
I move the adoption of ordinance 1111 and ordinance levying general property taxes for the 2022 budget year.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Yay.
Trustee Waugh,
Aye.
Trustee Rogan,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Caravas.
Aye.
Ordinance 1111 passes unanimously. Thank you. Please read the next item into the record, Madam Clerk.
Yes, this is the first reading of ordinance 1112, an ordinance of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, amending Chapter 16, Article 6 of the Lyons Municipal Code, updating commercial and mixed-use design guidelines.
Staff.
Good evening, Mayor and Trustees. This ordinance amends Chapter 16, Article 6 of the Lyons Municipal Code concerning the commercial design guidelines. For some background, the Board of Trustees instructed PCDC to study and propose changes on the town's existing commercial and mixed-use design guideline and design standards and guidelines. Through multiple workshops, research, feedback from the community, PCDC has determined it's necessary to update the Lyons Municipal Code to create a more efficient and effective design guidelines. The PCDC also held a workshop with the Board of Trustees in October to review these proposed guidelines. The guidelines haven't changed since that workshop. Tonight, the PCDC recommends the proposed ordinance to the board for consideration with PCDC resolution included in your packet. And additionally, I'd like to note that I've reached out to the private developers that we had, solicited feedback for on this. and let them know of the public process so they can provide feedback too, so that, you know, what the feedback they gave us is actually being used and we're changing things with it. I have a brief presentation that I'll share on my screen right now. And you'll probably recognize this from our prior meeting with the board or workshop with the board. So starting with just an agenda, this includes, we'll review the feedback from the board, the feedback from prior developments we've received. We'll go through some of the other municipalities we've looked at and the timing regarding the comp plan update as well, and then just some highlights of the recommendations we're providing. So from the Board of Trustees earlier this year gave feedback that the current guidelines or standards and guidelines seemed excessive or burdensome, were out of proportion with the need and appeared to be lengthy and costly to the applicants. So with this feedback, we formed a subcommittee to review recent developments that had completed the process. And working with the A-Lodge and the pole barn that had recently went through the design process, they gave us some feedback that there were some concerns with communications with the town, particularly the timeliness of the communications. Additionally, they said some requirements had come in at the end that were more of a surprise to the applicant. Along with the feedback from private developers in the town, we looked at other municipalities, and there were actually 21 municipalities that we reviewed. And from there, we identified what some of the differences and commonalities were. And then I think from that research, we understood that there's really not a lot of consistency between communities. The guidelines seem to vary drastically between the communities. A lot of the guidelines are driven from the comprehensive plan from the community. Typically, the towns would identify sections or like character areas of the town that would be identified, and then specific guidelines would be applied to those, you know, to keep that specific town's area character. And then last, we did find there were some common elements among the plans, and we used those common elements really to develop our template to draft the guidelines that we're proposing. So the PCDC does feel the guidelines should be driven by the objectives of the comprehensive plan, but however, the timing doesn't really align well. The comprehensive plan will not be completed or adopted until late in 2022, but there are a significant amount of developments underway, and as well as developments anticipated in the near future. So the PCDC felt that adopting these guidelines for now sooner than later, with the intent to revisit these guidelines as soon as the comp plan is updated to incorporate those objectives. So these new design guidelines, the PCDC feels that you know, they're sufficient but not excessive. They're business friendly, but allows the town to protect the character of Lyons. They fit within the comp plan, and they're flexible to allow for changes. So in conclusion, the PCDC recommends the adoption of the commercial design guidelines, requests the Board of Trustees endorse a relationship with the comp plan and the commercial design guidelines in the future. And last, I would just like to acknowledge Commissioner Drystat from the PCDC. He put a significant effort into this, and I think his role with leading this work was critical. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Planner Strom? I don't, could we have our phone? Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I've got a few questions. You mentioned input from the property owners, and particularly downtown property owners. Is does this draft incorporate that input?
So their input, I would say it was mostly not towards the design guidelines. A lot of it was towards the development review process. I think this simplifies the guidelines and provides less requirements. So I think that eliminates the surprises that come later that they, said were an issue. And so I think that's helpful towards that.
So I guess I'm not clear. So this draft of the proposed guidelines, it's been circulated around among existing property owners, including the downtown property owners?
No, it has not. I had notified the developers who we worked with to draft these that we'd be holding a public hearing, and that would probably be the most appropriate time to give their input. I wasn't sure. We discussed that, but it was difficult on who we select to provide this to. And we thought it'd be most appropriate for them to provide their input in the public hearing. That's when we'd like to hear it rather than just issuing it to specific developers. But I'd be open to, how to get this circulated among private developers and hear their input.
You're using the term developers, but downtown Lyons is built out. We all know that. But these design guidelines, as they're drafted, will apply in some cases to modifications of existing structures. So it seems to me, and that it would behoove the town to provide a draft of these we know who the property owners are downtown. We've got property tax rolls and everything else, and utility bills and all that. It seems to me like before the board votes on it, and that it should go to not just potential prospective developers in the future, but existing property owners, because it may affect them. And I think that there was an earlier draft, I don't remember, a year or so ago, and I think the mayor had some discussions with them as well, that went around to some of the downtown property owners, and we got some negative feedback from them, from at least a couple of them. And before I'd be willing to cast a vote, and which I guess would only happen on second reading on the final version of this, I would want to make sure that the property owners downtown got actual copies of this. You can do it electronically. You don't have to mail it all out, because I'd like to hear some of their comments, because these, to me, these are an improvement to what we have now, but I want to get not just future developer, but also property owner input on it. So I just want to know where that stood. Secondly, would these apply to any development applications that have been filed before they're adopted? And that may be a question for the town attorney. I don't know.
Yeah, that maybe I anticipate this until they're adopted, they wouldn't apply, but I don't think we intended for that, but Brandon could maybe speak.
Yeah, I would not consider these effective until they are passed by the board. And I think particularly in this instance where, especially if building permits have been pulled, that you have vested right at that point in time, I don't think it'd be appropriate in this instance to try to apply something like pending ordinance doctrine or a similar concept, just because we're talking about property rights in terms of the developers or redevelopers, as it may be, in their property. So I think these should be prospective and not retroactive in any sort of way.
Also got a few questions about some specific things in there, in this draft. And to me, one of the most important is in section, let me get the right number here, 16-6-100F. And it's under the subtitle architecture. And I think that's on page 9 of 13, at least how it appears on my screen. And it talks about, and it's in subparagraph 1, and it says, designs for 3-story structures will be considered based on acceptance by the Lyons Regional Fire District of its fire safety and emergency services assessment. As I read that, it's giving the fire district a veto over any three-story structure. Is that what's intended?
No, that shouldn't be what's the intent. Fire, yeah, three-story structure is acceptable and fire's acceptable of that as well. It just matters on the mitigation they need to provide the appropriate protection. So the intent is not to allow fire to veto a three-story building. So we can revise that.
Yeah, I don't really have any suggested revising language now, but that's a subject that's come up on multiple occasions before, where the fire district says it doesn't have a ladder truck to reach a third story, doesn't have enough money for one. The town says it's the fire district's duty to basically provide fire protection for whatever structures are built. And I don't know that discussion's ever been resolved one way or another, but I certainly don't think that the fire district should have absolute veto power. Now, whether should the town consider, recommendations from the fire district on what types of sprinkler systems should go in there and what type of exits or, fire safe exits, sure, absolutely. But I think that needs some more fleshing out. It's just, so I didn't know quite how to take that part of it. Another question is in 16-6-20 C, I believe it is. Hold on just a second. I'll take it. It's 16-6-20E, which I think is on page 3. It says these guidelines shall apply to all projects, including new construction or exterior renovation of a building requiring a building permit in the area of applicability described in this section. And I think that's the downtown area. It says, so I guess my question there is, does any project that requires a building permit trigger these guidelines? Or is it just exterior renovation of a building?
No, and that's a good point. I think the intent was previously we had limitations on what would trigger the design standards and guidelines, and I think that's a good point, that it's not necessarily addressed of what criteria would trigger that clearly. So, but no, the intent isn't to have this on every single every single building permit. I think we need to work on the criteria that would trigger that when it's appropriate, if they're doing a large enough renovation or exterior project.
Yeah, because you can get trigger building permit requirements for purely interior renovations if they're substantial enough, which wouldn't really affect the outside design at all, I wouldn't think. I guess there's a couple of other kind of like related questions, and there's some things in here about designs that would complement adjacent structures and coordinate with hold on a second. Phrase in here. Yeah, let's see. I guess my question is, the nature of it is, how could, particularly downtown, a renovation or a new building for that matter, complement and be consistent with adjacent structures, given how varied the structures are downtown? We have a number of beautiful historic sandstone fronts of buildings between 4th and 5th on Main Street, for example. in the same block, we've got some added on, I don't know what you call it, just corrugated material fronts that were added, I don't know, 1970s, 1980s, something like that. Somebody's been around here longer than me could address that. And so what I've got is that's something that's always kind of concerned me about these guidelines is when you have contrasting and maybe inconsistent building styles in the same block, mostly between 4th and 5th on Main, should you try to match the 70s and 80s corrugated add-on stuff, or should you try to match the old sandstone? And I just, and it also, the same thing about complementing adjacent structures. Well, if somebody ever builds something next to, for example, the old mostly shut down Indian curio shop or the pinball parlor, I'm not sure I want the new buildings to complement those adjacent structures. I don't think those are particularly desirable architecture. So that's what kind of rubs at me the wrong way sometimes about these guidelines. You put out these general guidelines, and you know, how do you deal with existing structures that we really don't want to have more like them, and how do you deal with variegated structures within like the same block? Can you express a preference for one or the other, or what's the best way to handle that?
I think the intent of these guidelines is to allow the, you know, like you said, the downtown varies greatly. And if we were to provide specific detailed guidelines, that was the concern, that would be too much of a requirement for a property owner, a developer. And so we wanted to allow flexibility, but then again, we want, if there was a new corrugated, whatever glass facade building, we wanted to have some sort of teeth to allow us to direct them on that as well. And so I think we tried to walk that as a fine line of not being too restrictive, yet allowing the town some ability to preserve the character that they want to see in it. And I think we'd be happy to open to suggestions on how better to do that. I think this is what we've proposed, but yeah, this is what we're here for, to hear better suggestions on from the board on that.
Again, I don't have any specific language, but between first and second reading, maybe I can circulate some around to you and former trustee Drystad, whose work I also want to recognize. He's worked long and hard on this, and you can tell he's put a lot of thought into it, but maybe express some general types of preferences for where there are contrasting things, or if it's going to be located next to, you know, a dilapidated old structure, that you don't pick those up with that type of general language. Just express a preference for coordinating with basically the old sandstone historic parts of downtown Lyons. And let's see, it seems like there was one more thing I had. Oh, I know what it was. The Eastern Corridor area, the map that exists in the code right now with little shaded areas for where the Eastern Corridor design guidelines apply to, what's color coded that those existing guidelines, and I agree that those need to be redone, apply to, were just the properties in the Eastern Corridor that had been annexed at that time. So they were already in town limits. They didn't try to address those that were already like out past 3666. But my question is, and a number of those are in the area between McConnell Drive or Stone Canyon Drive and the 3666 intersection. But these guidelines say that they're intended to apply to the area around the 3666 intersection and eastward. What about that area in between McConnell Drive and basically 66? Was it like deliberate to not have the Eastern Corridor guidelines apply there?
Yeah, that was deliberate. We had a lot of discussion on this. We only have two character areas identified, the downtown and the Eastern Corridor. We talked about a midtown a bit, which would define that area kind of you're talking about, but none of us could really describe the character for that area. And So our thoughts were that having the eastern corridor and having the main street, we know those characters. Hopefully what happens in the middle melds between the two of those. But we didn't really feel comfortable defining that area because we weren't sure what the character of that area was, because it differs vastly between buildings and types. So,
And as I read these draft guidelines, the existing Eastern Corridor guidelines would be repealed and replaced with these.
correct.
Okay, that's, I think that would be a vast improvement. I think I don't know how many pages the existing Eastern Corridor guidelines are, 40 or 50, something like that. And I think the Eastern Corridor section would boil that down to about half a page. So I think that's wonderful. Thank you. And I'll defer to the other board members as to whether we'd go ahead and send this on to second reading, but in between first and second reading, I'll try to come up with some language on the points and the questions I've raised and send those to you and Commissioner Drystad also. Thank you.
Questions? I agree with the Mayor Pro Tem on one point, and that's to get more comprehensive feedback from the property owners. I think that that's really important. And I don't know if you can do that by the time of the second reading, Philip, but I think that it's incredibly important that we get that feedback. I wouldn't feel comfortable without it, and I don't want public feedback at the time of second reading. That's a little late, you know, to incorporate language. We'll be here all night trying to incorporate language. But if you could get that done, that'd be great. Any other comments? Administrator Simonson?
You know, we could call the second reading. It doesn't have to be exactly, you know, it doesn't have to be 2 weeks. That's a minimum.
Good.
So with the holidays, if you want to, you could call your second meeting for the January 18th meeting and give us a little time.
Yeah, let's see what kind of feedback we get and if we're getting any, and let's do that. I mean, I don't think we're in a hurry in regard to this. All right. I'll entertain a motion. There's no further comments.
I'll move to pass ordinance 1112 on first reading.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Further comments? Trustee Rogan?
Yeah, I would just really like to commend the PCDC and and all the work the PCDC has done on this. I know it was a huge, heavy lift. I started working on it when I was on the PCDC. And also I'd like to commend Planner Strom for all the work that he's put into this. It's a vast, vast improvement, and I think it's going to make lives easier for everybody, and it's going to make the town better for everybody. So thank you.
Further comments? I agree 100%. If there are no further comments, I'll call for the vote.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Waugh,
Aye.
Trustee Rogan,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Yay.
Trustee Caravas.
Aye.
Ordinance 1112 passes unanimously on first reading. Could you please read the next item into the record, Madam Clerk?
Yes, this is the first reading of ordinance 1113, an ordinance of the town of Lyons, Colorado, amending Chapter 16, Article 17 of the Lyons Municipal Code, updating the site plan and development plan review process.
Staff, Philip?
Hello again. This ordinance would amend Chapter 16, Article 17 of the Lyons Municipal Code. As I discussed earlier, similar to the prior item, the board directed PCDC to look at the development review process. PCDC has determined it's necessary to update the Lyons Municipal Code for a more efficient and effective development plan review processes and better protect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of the town. Again, we had reviewed this with the Board of Trustees in October. These are the same, this is the same development review process that we reviewed at that point. And I will share my screen to just do a brief presentation to walk through some of the changes in the code. So first, I would just like to say, you know, in working through the code and process, the general consensus was the code wasn't broken. It didn't need to be completely revised, but there was a lack of clarity. I think this effort was good in modifying the existing code to clarify some items that were incorrect. I think there is still work to do on this code. I think this has done a lot for it though, but it really doesn't change the process so much. We just looked at changing clarity, terms, and definitions. And I think there are some items that we can look at, you know, after this, but I think this goes a long way in making the code much better. To summarize some of the main changes, first, it was a modification of terms and definitions. It also rearranged some of the code and revised some of the language. It modified the threshold criteria for major development review approval track. It added language that was consistent with the design guidelines, and then it also removed outdated requirements. Oops. So some of the most significant modifications were the terms and definitions. The current code uses two terms to describe the same submission and review process. The only difference in that process is the approval track. And that approval track is based on the magnitude of the development. So because the submission and the review are the same, we chose to revise a term that would simply be development review rather than having site plan or development plan review when they're actually the same submission. So it would be just development review. Also, a made item in the submission package, it was previously called the plan set. It was described as a plan set, but currently it's in the code, it describes it as a site and development plan map. It doesn't really make sense. It's more of a plan set. And so we've just kind of modified that language to make it clear for applicants to understand. And then regarding the approval tracks, this is determined by the scale and impact a development may have. Currently, site plan review is approved by the town administrator. This is for smaller developments. The development plan review is approved by the Board of Trustees. This goes through public hearings and PCDC for PCDC and the Board of Trustees. And so we felt that minor and major were better terms and more logically reflected the development scale. Again, the final approvers remain the same. The process remains the same. The town administrator will approve minor development reviews and the Board of Trustees for major development reviews. Additionally, we rearranged some of the language to provide clarity. For example, the modified code, the new code or proposed code begins with describing the two approval tracks that an applicant will go through. This is up front and describes the building permitting at the end. The current code begins with discussing minor building permits in the beginning that are exempt from the code. So it's a little confusing for applicants. So we felt that rearranging that language was better. Additionally, language was revised for clarity. For example, business days and calendar days were mixed and used interchangeably. So we just clarified that. And additionally, in other places, there was language that was modified to just clarify the intent. For example, there's a section in the code that discusses a trash disposal plan, but it wasn't exactly clear on what was requested for a plan. So we kind of added some language. So these are just examples of some of the clarity we've changed and revised to make it better. So I want to just circle back quick to the approval tracks, specifically the criteria that would define a development as major. So this is, I guess, for example, in number 3C in the current code, it lumps together a number of requirements that would trigger the major development review track. We believe this was meant to be a serial list. It's a little confusing to read through. So that is a revision to more of a serial list of the requirements that would trigger a major development review. Again, another example of how this was clarified. And last, there were some minor modifications in the code to be consistent with the development guidelines so that they're not duplicative, or so the requirements are consistent. And also we removed any outdated requirements such as Mylar submissions, which are no longer required by Boulder County for this. So in conclusion, the PCDC has recommended the adoption of the development review code modifications, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Philip? There are no questions. Oh, Trustee Rogan.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Planner Strom. So I have two questions. Has this been reviewed by folks who have previously gone through the development process in town?
So again, we did notify them of the public hearings. We haven't received feedback. I think we can look at doing a similar outreach of what we plan to do with the design guidelines on this as well. I think that makes sense to use that approach.
Terrific. And the second question is, should we pass this on second reading? How will this process affect folks who may have already submitted?
Again, I believe, like Brandon spoke to, with as far as building permitting and vested rights, anyone who has a land use application in at this point, prior to the, I guess, adoption of on second reading would fall under the prior code. And then this new code would be for anyone submitting land use applications after it's adopted.
Adoption and publication pursuant to Colorado state law.
Adoption of, okay. It seems to me that there's like a little bit of a difference there, and I'm curious about just being able to streamline the process for people who may have already submitted. So with the design guidelines, I understand that. With this process, it seems pretty onerous to have folks have to revert to the previous process, which was much more unclear and cumbersome. So maybe this is a question for Attorney Dittman. Is there a way to shift people over to the new, more streamlined guidelines?
I mean, I think if people want to go to the new guidelines and operate as if the new guidelines were passed, and it's their choice, then the town could consider that, of course. And I think certainly there's places like, example, the serial list issue we mentioned earlier. I mean, we can apply that now. That's our understanding of how the code should read. And so there are things in here where we've done clarifications, and we can certainly apply that understanding to the existing code for the short period of time it will still be in place.
Okay,
but someone can always choose to use the new process. It's more the problem is someone's already underway under the old process, and then we take the rug out from underneath of them and say, oh no, you got to redo it all and do it under the new one. That's the bigger concern from a legal perspective.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Philip, was there any public participation in the PCDC process?
No, there wasn't. We invited some of the prior developers we would worked with, and it was publicly noticed, but we received no public comment.
Thank you. That's very interesting to me. Okay, Mayor Pro Tem.
Question, Philip, I posed this by email this afternoon. I don't know if you had much time to think about it, but it relates to the location and development, location and extent review for public buildings. I'd ask the question of whether that should really apply to town projects or not. And would there be any downside to exempting the town from having to do location and extent review of its own projects?
So on that, I agree with what your comments on that, although that was based off of I guess state legislation, and I haven't had time to look into it to see if we can exempt the town from that or not. But maybe Brandon can speak more to that.
I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure my feeling is that you can, because I haven't seen it anywhere else. Of course, I primarily worked with home rule municipalities prior, and so I'd have to double check. But my feeling is that it's not necessary from a legal perspective. It's my best guess without having done the research. So I wasn't prepared until I saw the email late today to look into that. And that, the reason it was probably put in place short of a state requirement is that to give the public some input on the ability to have some input potentially on, location extent of town properties. And that's the reason why it was put in. But I can't say for certain without having done the research.
Okay.
And I did make a minor modification in that section. Previously that section was pretty broad, and we'd run into problems in the past where, it was so broad and it was forgotten to be done in some instances where maybe it was thought that it shouldn't have been done. And so I did make a modification for only significant utility facilities requiring a location extent review, because it reads currently that all utility infrastructure must go through location extent review. So I did make one. I try not to insert myself into the policy decisions, but I think that was a reflective of the town's current practice and one that made sense.
Brandon, my understanding of the reason that there is a state statute on location and extent review is things like a county wanting to build a county building within a town's city limits, or a school district wanting to build a school within the town city limits, and they ran into occasions in the past where the city government would try to block that and and so it was really to give the town some say in projects done by other governmental entities. Whereas if the town's doing its own project, obviously if the town has a problem with that project, just don't fund it, don't do it.
Yeah.
So, and the concern that, and this is just to kind of follow up on why I asked the question, is a couple of times in the past, the question has arisen of some major projects that the town did that we didn't formally go through the location and extent review, and oops, should we have done that? And if you recall, for both the 2nd Avenue Bridge and the 4th Avenue Bridge, we waived it in advance. And so do we really need to do that? Because if you've approved a big new project, you've obviously looked at the location and extent of it. So, I'll just defer that till the second reading. And if we decide it has to be in there by statute, we'll leave it in there. If not, I'll probably at that point make an amendment to remove it.
And if I may follow up on that a little bit, what you're referring to where, an outside entity is wanting to cite a major facility, that's a 1041 permit. And so usually it's referred to in those kind of terms, and it's not done so here, which makes it somewhat unique. And I've certainly applied those types of extent and review processes in other jurisdictions for things like transmission lines and major electrical facilities, substations, that kind of thing. But this is somewhat unique in that it's applied to the town and a much broader range of facilities rather than just things that the state has determined through the 1041 regulations as having a substantial state interest, which are usually major utility facilities is really what those are concerned with.
Further questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I guess I have a question or something that the board to think about, whether or not the board wants us to be on the same schedule as the previous ordinance or not, or whether it's okay with it being on the next meeting. So just something to think about.
We can make that decision at a later date, can't we, Counselor?
I think we need board input now, unless it'll just be me, you, and Victoria deciding that.
Do you, let's see, do you want to keep them together? What's the consensus of the board? Mayor Pro Tem?
Do them at the same time because some property, owners, for example, may have comments on both of them and they don't come to one meeting instead of two. That's better for everybody.
I agree, Trustee Careless.
Agree.
Trustee Wah,
I agree. I think they should be on the same schedule.
Trustee Miller,
I agree as well.
Trustee Rogan, Trustee Lowell.
Agree, same schedule.
Okay, they'll come at the same time. Okay, do we have a motion? Mayor Pro Tem?
I move the adoption on first reading of ordinance 1113, amending chapter 16, article 17 of the Lyons Municipal Code regarding site plan and development review process.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further comments? Mayor Pro Tem?
I've got, I don't know, 3 or 4 suggested changes on some of these, and I could do them in the form of amendments now, one by one, or I could submit the comments. Since we've got some extra time, I could submit the comments and maybe they could be printed out. So we have to read them all and go through them and finally they could be proposed as part of the packet for the next consideration. And maybe that would save some time. A couple of, maybe that's just a quick list without going through all the changes. And so just so Philip and Brandon will know where I'm coming from. A couple of things. 16-17-10. I think that's A1C about minor developments. As written, it says basically says if a development has any of these 5 things, it shall be considered a minor development review. I don't think that's exactly what's meant. I think it means if it has those things, but none of the major developments. In other words, the way this is written, any development that has one of these 5 criteria for minor review would be considered a minor review. And I think you need some language, something like, but those things have none of the items that would trigger major.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
That's one thing. Another, there's when notice goes out to the relevant agencies and property owners, it says within 10 business days, but it doesn't say of when. I think what's intended is 10 days of receipt of the required items that make the a complete plan. There's also some things about review by property and interest owners, neighboring property owners that need some more attention. I think one of them says that they're, as drafted, they're not to get copies of the actual physical copies of the plan. They're just going to be notified of them, and they can review the plan at town hall. I think in this day and age, we should be beyond requiring people to come down to town hall to physically look at papers. And there ought to be a way to either provide them electronic copies or at least, where practical, give them the means to look at those electronically or on a town website or developer website or something like that. Let's see. And comments by property owners and interest owners. It also says those comments should be provided to town staff. They should also go to the applicant, because the way that process works, they would do comments at least one day, written comments at least one day prior to a hearing, and then they can do verbal comments at a hearing. Well, the applicant should be able to get copies of those comments too, because they might have to deal with them at the hearing. In another place, step 7, it says the town staff may require the applicant to do certain things. I think it should read the Board of Trustees or the town staff. Oh, I know. That's to submit a development agreement. Says the town staff may require a development agreement. I think if the Board of Trustees, as we did, for example, with Summit Housing, is going to approve a major development, maybe the Board of Trustees, it says, no, we want the development agreement to include 1, 2, 3, 4. So I think the board needs some input on that as well. And I'll give out all the section numbers and pages to the people in it, to Brandon and to Philip, and maybe those can be put together as a more readable package before second reading.
I appreciate that. And I have received your errata request as well, and we'll fix all those before the board meeting as well.
Yeah, I don't think there are any objections to including all of Mayor Pro Tem's language.
Yeah. Well, I think the request is to include that language in the packet for a substantive discussion and vote at the next meeting. Yep.
Yes. So do we have a motion? I can't remember.
Yes, we do.
So long. And we have a second?
Yes.
Good. Any further discussion? Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Real quickly, a lot of these changes have been needed for a while. The first time, they go back to when I was on the PCDC. Trustee Rogan talked about the prior ones when she was on there. And first time we looked at some of these, we said, ooh, some of this stuff is inconsistent and subject to multiple interpretations and inconsistent terms. And so I still literally have some notes, I think, from 2017 on some of this stuff, but a lot of hard work went into this too. I know Philip worked on it. I know Yanni had worked on it before she left. I think Chairman Hamrick of the PCDC also worked on it, as did former Chairman Edding. And I think these provisions, particularly when we get them finalized, will simplify and streamline and make much more understandable the development plan review process compared to what we have now. And I think they are a big step in the right direction. And I commend everybody who put a lot of hard work into this.
And you worked on them as well, Mayor Pro Tem, but you're too humble to admit it. Okay. Any further comments? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Miller, Trustee Rogan,
Aye.
Trustee Waugh,
Aye.
Trustee Caravas.
Ordinance 1113 passes unanimously. Folks, let's take a break. I think we need a break. We've been here since 6 o'clock. Let's get back at 25 to 10. How does that sound for everybody? 10 minutes? Okay. Thank you, everybody, for being patient. Madam Clerk, could you please read the next item into the record?
Yes, the next item is the first reading on ordinance 1114, an ordinance of the town of Lyons, Colorado, amending certain sections of chapter 16 of the Lyons Municipal Code to allow for marijuana centers, marijuana infused product manufacturers, and cultivation operations in town zoning districts, previously allowing for medical marijuana centers, medical marijuana infused product manufacturers, and medical marijuana optional premises cultivation operations.
Staff, counselor, I assume you're going to take this?
Yes, Mayor.
Go ahead.
So this one's a little more straightforward than the past two in terms of its simplicity. Essentially, what this is about is an error in this current zoning code. As you may recall, in 2013, the voters in Colorado legalized recreational marijuana. In 2014, the town of Lyons extensively updated its business licensing regime to basically take away the distinction between medical and recreational marijuana with regards to licensing. And instead of there being medical and recreational facilities, there just be marijuana centers and cultivation centers and the like, basically combining the two uses. For whatever reason, at the same time, the zoning code was never updated to reflect this change in use that was made in the business licensing section of the code. And so this was discovered, recently with some of the new applications for recreational marijuana licenses. And just an error, it was really a manifest error in the existing zoning code given the change in the licensing scheme in 2014. So all we are doing is adding, updating the language, if you will, to reflect the current licensing of marijuana in Lyons through this code amendment.
Are there any questions for Counselor? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve ordinance 1114 on first reading.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any comments? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Waugh,
Aye.
Trustee Rogan,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Yay.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Caravas.
Ordinance 1114 passes unanimously on first reading. Could you please read the next agenda item into the record, Madam Clerk?
Yes, it's the first reading of ordinance 1115, an ordinance of the town of Lyons, Colorado, amending section 18-15-10 of the Lyons Municipal Code, adopting by reference the 2020 edition of the National Electric Code as the town of Lyons Electric Code.
Staff presentation, please.
I guess I can take this one, I guess, too.
Okay.
So it came to my understanding recently from the town's building official that the state of Colorado had passed had adopted the 2020 National Electric Code. It's my understanding that the state of Colorado is the entity responsible for adopting the state electrical code, as you might imagine, and that basically when that is done, that cities and towns all follow that. The reference in the code right now is the 2017 code. And so this is simply an update to make it the 2020 code. There are a few changes between the 2017 and 22 code. They're mainly dealing with grounding requirements and new builds and substantially modified builds. I see Aaron's on. Maybe Aaron can speak to those more in detail if you have questions. But it's simply an update from the 2017 code to the 2020 code is what this ordinance is attempting to accomplish. And it's also my understanding that we've been applying the 2020 code currently. So this isn't really even a change for our operations.
Anything to add, Aaron?
No, that covered it pretty well. It was mostly, again, from the building inspector and the building department. And so I just put together what they had to give an overview of the changes.
Okay, any questions for staff? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve ordinance 1115 on first reading.
Have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Waugh,
Aye.
Trustee Rogan,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Okay,
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
and Trustee Caravas.
Aye.
Ordinance 1115 passes unanimously on first reading. Madam Clerk, could you please read the consent agenda into the record?
Yes, item 1 is resolution 2021-126, a resolution of the town of Lyons, Colorado, determining that a regular municipal election be held on April 5th, 2022, and shall be a mail ballot election. Item 2 is resolution 2021-127, a resolution of the town of Lyons, Colorado, adopting the 2022 salary schedule. Item 3 is resolution 2021-128, a resolution of the town of Lyons, Colorado, adopting the 2022 fee schedule. Item 4 is resolution 2021-129, a resolution of the town of Lyons, Colorado, ratifying the 11th Amendment to the Professional Services Agreement with OTAC Incorporated. This has been moved to the 1220 Board of Trustees meeting. Item 5 is resolution 2021-130, resolution of the town of Lyons, Colorado, ratifying the professional services agreement for consultant services for the backup power project with Centennial Archaeology LLC. Item 6 is resolution 2021-131, a resolution of the town of Lyons, Colorado, approving an intergovernmental agreement between the town of Lyons and the city of Longmont for electric standby distribution service by Longmont Power and Communications. Item 7 is the December accounts payable. Item 8 are the November 15th, 2021 Board of Trustees meeting minutes. And item 9 are the November 30th, 2021 Special Board of Trustees meeting minutes.
Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Are there any items that any trustees wish to remove from the consent agenda?
Trustee Rogan has her hand up, sir.
Trustee Rogan.
I'd like to remove item 1 to ask a brief question.
Okay. Are there any others? If not, I'll call for the vote.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Rogan,
Aye.
Trustee Waugh,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
okay,
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
and Trustee Caravas.
Aye.
The consent agenda is approved. Trustee Rogan, your question on item 1.
Thank you, Mayor. So the mail ballot election, I just want to make sure that that includes people being able to use the drop box in front of town hall as well. So people don't have to mail their ballot. They can drop it in the box.
Yes, and it always has, as well as town hall will be open 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. election day.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was all.
Yep.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I have a question too. For that April election, what would be the approximate deadline to get a referendum measure approved to go on the ballot, if whether either by the board or by a citizens group or anybody? Because I know the ballots have to go in the mail a certain number of days before, and then for something to be on the ballot to get it printed and everything, there's a prior deadline. Any idea when that would be?
You know, that was asked by Miss Laverne, and we didn't really look at it because she wasn't sure if the board was going to, she was going to put forth before you guys the proposal for a culture tax, but she thought maybe that was something the board would do. But I can get that date for you and email the board with that. Unless Brandon knows right off the top of his head. I don't.
No, I don't.
If you can pull it out. Yeah.
I know that the clerk's organization, usually they put out the calendar, right? Or, yeah, and I don't have access to that other than people sharing it with me. So
Okay, I'll get that for you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, because I've got something in mind. It's not the culture tax. I've got something else in mind that I'm thinking about. So, okay, thank you.
Okay,
Do we have a motion to approve resolution 2021-126 on the consent agenda?
So moved.
And we have a second. No further discussion. I'll call for the vote.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Waugh,
Aye.
Trustee Rogan,
Aye.
Trustee Caravas,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
and Trustee Miller.
Yay.
The motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Please read the next agenda item into the record, Madam Clerk.
Yes, this is discussion and direction regarding the requirement for PUD submittal for Lyons Ute Highway LLC.
Staff presentation.
Yeah, I can go. Unfortunately, my cover memo sheet didn't make it in. Generator is here to speak, so I'll just give a brief intro to the board on some background that I think is useful, and then I'll let them speak. But for some background tonight, Mr. Tamburello has requested discussion to amend the buy and sell contract deadline that requires Lyons Ute Highway to complete the zoning amendment application for the planned unit development district at the 4651 and 4652 Ute Highway properties. On February 28th, 2020, the town of Lyons sold these properties to Paul Tamburello, which was succeeded shortly after by Lyons Ute Highway. The contract included additional provisions requiring Lyons Ute Highway to complete a zoning amendment application for a PUD district within 1 year of closing or pay a penalty of $100,000. Then in January of 2020, the town extended that deadline to 2 years from the date of closing. So that's February 28th, 2022, due to significant delays in the property development because of difficulties of COVID-19. So now, as February 28th, 2022 is approaching, Paul would like to discuss this requirement with the board. With that, I can turn it over to Paul and Renee.
Welcome, Paul Tamburello and Renee Doubleday. So nice to see you again. Take it away.
Thank you, Mayor Angelo and trustees. It's been a long meeting so far. I hope everybody is making it through this one. Yeah, it's windy and cold out there, just in case you don't know. But well, thank you for your time this evening. I think it might be best, again, I'm Paul Tamburello. I think pretty much we've met everybody on the call. And my business partner, Renee Doubleday, is on here as well, just as by way of introduction. I think it'd be best to maybe start with a brief history. Thank you, Philip, about kind of laying the kind of history out. Again, I think the ordinance, or the request was put in place by Mayor Sullivan, or the request was right prior to closing, because I think the concern was that somebody would acquire the property and then just sit on it, and which is a valid concern. And so as a condition of closing, we decided to go ahead and just do it because we knew we were going to, stay engaged and involved. So Renee, if we could screen share, I think we have access to screen share. We just wanted to kind of demonstrate a couple of things and then maybe have a conversation. This might look familiar. This was sort of the cover of that presentation that we gave a while back about Gateway to the Great Outdoors. It's still the working, theme for us for the project. Renee, if you want to go on. That's just kind of our core premise. Every investment in real estate is first an investment in community. And then what I wanted to show you is a little bit about what we've been up to. We are still, hosting biweekly meetings up in Lyons, and or via Zoom. And we are constantly meeting with, neighbors, business people in the area, other professionals throughout the corridor, to just sort of talk about plans for the project, plans for neighboring parcels, what people are working on. We're also coordinating and conducting with Eastern Corridor property owners adjacent and again, kind of throughout the corridor. And municipal collaborations that we've been working on is we delivered or proposed the EDA. We did the board presentation to you about engaging in an EDA grant request, which was approved. And we've been doing what we can to support staff with that application. We've been doing ongoing networking consulting with Nathan Fay, who is the Director of Outdoor Recreation for the Office of OEdit. We are active members in the Eastern Corridor Working Group with Kim Mitchell and then Trustee Waugh and Paul Dreyer, which has, we've had, I think, 3 or 4 meetings so far. It's just kind of getting going, but I think there's some good work happening there. Participated in the 2021 Comp Plan Focus Group. We've met with superintendent from Rocky Mountain National Park a couple of times now about moving a welcome center or the possibility of a welcome center on the site for Rocky Mountain National Park where people can get permits and things. Our next step there is to go to the Convention and Visitor Bureau to see if there's some dollars that could fund that position. We did, along with the town of Lyons, engage in a traffic study for the entire corridor. That study is complete. We have submitted it to CDOT with a recommendation for some ideas about a corridor rework for a traffic boulevard, if you will, or that would encompass the entire corridor. We have a meeting Monday with CDOT to hear their thoughts about those changes.
Actually, tomorrow. We have a meeting tomorrow.
You're right, it's tomorrow. Or Wednesday. It's Wednesday, isn't it?
Oh, I'm sorry, it is Wednesday.
That's Wednesday. And then we introduced the town to Jamie Gillis, who was actually one of the people who worked on writing the language for the Creative District application, or Creative District in Colorado, and been working on an application for Creative Districts. And she's also been helping support with the EDA grant process. And then the other thing in terms of site developments is, all of you know, the north side, we have done complete demolition on that site and backfill. On the south side, we've begun demolition. We demoed the 2 pump buildings that were on the east side of the south parcel. And we're still working back and forth with the proposal to take down the rest of the tanks on the south side. We're still sort of debating what to do with the original building, the older building. I think for now, we're still going to leave it as a potential adaptive reuse, but the tanks that are on the south side, to do the river restoration the right way, I guess you could put it, or to do it in a fashion where we wouldn't have to disturb it in the future to do the demo. Because we've engaged S2O to do the engineering, and that engineering is underway. We also have met with the contractor. We're going to do a design build contract there. And the recommendation was to remove the tanks now, as opposed to try to do it after the restoration. It would be difficult. So that is all in process. And then we've been trying to do what we can to support any town needs regarding, for instance, the tree cycle and some RV parking and some other things. And then just to give you a sense of the cash investment, so far we're about $225,000 into demolition, architecture and engineering around 30, and that's going to probably double here in the next 3 or 4 months, just with the engineering that's been engaged for the river. Taxes and insurance, debt service. So bottom line is, we hope that we're demonstrating that we're 100% engaged and moving forward. We're just trying to be very thoughtful about what to do there, when to do it, and what's the best, possible way to approach it. Also very aware that, or very cognizant of the fact that if something alone happens out there, we really feel like it wouldn't be as successful as I think we and the town would like it to be. And so for that, I think we would like to talk about the idea of removing the condition altogether, as opposed to extending it again. And for a couple of reasons. One is, again, I hope we're demonstrating that we're engaged. And two is that the way it was written, and Mr. Dittman, maybe if you can correct me if I'm wrong, what it would require is us to submit for a PUD. It had nothing to do about approval of a PUD or anything. It just simply stated that we had to submit for a PUD, which I don't think is in anybody's interest to just submit for a PUD. And there are costs associated with it. And it, would just sort of seem a bit of a waste of time to just sort of submit something when we're not ready to do that. So that's the ask. Renee, was there anything I missed or anything you want to add?
No, I think it's just, we made our best estimate the last time we asked for it to be extended. And, just in the interest of everyone's time, we don't want to, just come back with another sort of arbitrary date. And we don't, we're trying to work in tandem with the town. And so some of that is, just a little bit of a slower process. And so we honor that, but it just seems, if the fear is that we're not engaged or that we're not moving forward, we just hope that we show that that's not the case, and that maybe the need for this particular requirement might go away.
Are there any questions for either Paul or Renee?
Mr. Dittman has his hand up.
Mr. Dittman, sir.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Just to follow up on, Paul asked whether I could confirm whether or not what the requirement was. It is just to submit the PUD currently. And the reason for that, I think, as you all know, is that we can't contractually guarantee the board will approve anything. And so all we can do is require the submission. We can't say anyway whether it'll be approved or denied or however the board will act. We can't bind the hands of a future legislative body.
Is part of your engineering to try to reclaim that southern bank, Paul?
We're not going to be able to reclaim really, I mean, out of the 4 acres on that south side, about almost 1.5 acres is in the river bed, and we're not going to be able to reclaim it. It would create a rise, which, as you all well know, we're not going to be able to do. So because of the way the neighbor to the south of us redid his bank, it changed the center line, let's say, of the river extensively. But as I understand it, and we've been counseled, that to try to get that changed at this point is not going to happen.
Okay. Any further questions by the board? Trustee
Comment.
Law. Trustee Law.
Comment. I'll start by saying, I'm in favor of waiving this requirement. But with that said, I'd like to explain why that is. I think this was understand the intention of it, and perhaps some of the members of the board that were on the board that put this can comment to it. But, my feeling was that part of the purchase price and negotiation for it was that the property would be used and developed. With that said, I know how difficult it is to go through the development process here for many businesses and many people that are bringing in investment into the town. And I think that this team has been very engaged and very involved in the town and done a lot of things very positively for the town. But this goes to my feeling that we have development requirements and development things that occur that we should not always be trying to put unique and unusual restrictions and requirements on them. It's, I think, one of the things that outside developers have raised about doing business in the town of Lyons is Boulder's hard and difficult to work with, but they're consistent and we know what we're going to get. And I just think in general that we often like to think that we're smarter or we can perhaps figure out something outside of the processes that have gone through the overall development of requirements and those types of things. And they don't always fit, and situations and economic things occur and global pandemics, as well as a lot of other things. So while I did fight vigorously to not extend it the last time, I'm actually suggesting that we waive it this time because, I think in general, it was maybe not thought all the way through. So that's my comment. And my feeling is I really don't want to have Paul and Renee come and tell us every 6 months why maybe they couldn't get it done or what have you. I think we should just let them develop it. I know they want to develop it just as much, if not more than all of us do. So that's my comment.
Further comments? Trustee Miller?
I would concur with Trustee Law. I think that it was a little bit arbitrary to begin with to put this in place from the get-go. I think that it was sort of a knee-jerk reaction, and one that wasn't necessarily well thought out. I think maybe we're just trying to protect ourselves a little bit too much. And I fully believe that we're going to get, a nice development out of the deal. So we just need to let them do what they need to do.
Further comments? Trustee Rogan.
Thank you, Mayor, and nice to see you, Paul and Renee. Sorry that the hour is so late for you guys. I concur with my colleagues, and I want to say I think you guys have been really great partners to the town, and really feels like you're part of the community. And I believe that what is developed out there is going to be great. So yeah, ever forward. I mean, we love seeing you, but we don't want to see you every 6 months asking for this.
Further comments? Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with the prior comments as well. With as much time and money that the developer has invested here, they're going to want a return on their investment at some point, and they don't get one by just letting the property sit there. They have, I believe, the tax valuation's already been increased on it by Boulder County, so they're paying more taxes. We're getting more property taxes from it, and eventually those economic incentives will lead them to either develop it or sell it if they decide not to. So I think I'm inclined to let the private sector market work and let them develop it when they think the appropriate time is. And so I'm okay with waiving the requirement.
Any further comments? Trustee Kurovas? Okay, Trustee Lowe? So we are unanimous in agreeing to most likely have council bring forward an agreement that negates the previous contract. But I just want to say a couple of things. From the very beginning, from the first meeting that Mr. Tamburello attended, I complimented him on his integrity, and I trust him completely. And I think that concurring with my fellow board members. I think that the development is going to end up being terrific. And I can't wait. It's been a lot longer than any of us thought it was going to be, but things have happened that have lasted longer than any of us thought they would. So we're with you. We're all on the same team.
Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor?
Yeah, just so the board knows what will happen next is we'll have to bring back an ordinance to the next meeting to amend the buy and sell agreement to take out that requirement.
Okay, that's fine. That's the direction I think that you sense unanimously from the board. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it and your support
Appreciate it.
and guidance. It's been we really have fallen in love with your town.
It's a beauty, isn't it?
It's a special place. And so thank you for your time tonight and all of your service.
Thank you. Thank you, Renee.
Many thanks.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Madam Clerk, please read the next item into the record.
The next item is discussion and direction on grant submittal to Colorado Department of Agriculture for weed mitigation.
Staff?
Sort of, if they've, yeah, he is. Director Cosgrove still here, as well as the chair of the Ecology Advisory Board, Steve Sims.
Okay. Mr. Sims, sir?
Good evening, all of you.
Oh, do you want to
Mayor?
start report first, Mayor?
I'm happy to introduce them. We, from understanding, the BEAB was going to go ahead and give a presentation and then their recommendation regarding the grant. And I would be here to help answer any questions.
Okay. Steve, you want to start?
Yes, that'll be great. Mayor and board, appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you.
Before you, we have a matching grant proposal related to weed management, including a part-time staffing position and alternatives to non-synthetic chemical treatment methods for weed mitigation. These will be used for our parks, open space, right-of-ways, and hardscapes. The EAB has identified the town's economic vitality is closely tied to our environmental health, and we would like to put those both in action. And so within the town of Lyons over the past few years, there has been an increase in public input around the weed management, and more so the reduction of herbicide and pesticide and chemical usage, basically in an effort to protect our community from our youth being exposed to these chemicals and the unknowns. Last month, just recently, local citizens Kathleen Spring and Kathy Rivers, the Weed Posse, brought to our attention a 1997 Colorado legislature established policy related to Colorado Noxious Weed Management Fund through the Department of Agriculture to provide additional financial resources for on-the-ground noxious weed management. We understand that our board is, and boards and commissions in general are not authorized for grants, to apply for grants on our behalf, but we seek the Board of Trustees. We appear to be the only town advisory board with this responsibility in regards to being tasked with the weed management. So that's why it's come up before us. Let me scroll down here a minute. This is basically to address noxious weeds in general, to map locations of the A-listed weeds, such as myrtle spurge in particular. Municipalities are required by the state of Colorado to attempt to eradicate these A-listed species. With this grant, the town of Lyons would meet this requirement. Late last month with Victoria, she provided details in regards to getting this in front of you today and on this agenda. First, we had to post a public meeting, and in the agenda, we went ahead and did that. Second, we had to host a public meeting to get formal motions in a second, and then we did get a majority vote request to the board to submit this application. including the implications on the town's budget. The budget is slated to be adopted this evening, and we have nothing in it for this grant match. Let me go on, and we're really not asking for any additional funding. Last week, the EAB organized and held a special meeting and approved it, and we are putting it before you this evening. Within this time, in the last few days, our EAB board member, Bob Brackenridge, has researched and prepared a detailed draft grant proposal involving a Town of Lyons matching grant related to $76,140 to around $80,250. This is a golden opportunity to gain some extra funding to support town staff with equipment and staff help at no additional out-of-pocket expense to the Town of Lyon. The budget is to provide full cost sharing in-kind expenses via in-kind expenses, and no additional revenue from the town is required. The match is to be from volunteer hours and from an existing 2020 plan expenditures for weed control by the town. Cost share match can include cash contributions, personal services, or in-kind services. Our proposal is December 17th, and we feel that the budget numbers are close and based mainly on reasonable estimates. For now, they provide an example of how a reasonable budget could be structured to provide a full cost sharing, but no additional revenue to the town. It's reasonable to complete the draft before this December 17th grant submittal deadline. Staff would further review and edit our proposed grant application prior to submittal. And one of the components would include a high quality steam weed machine for weed mitigation. It's called the Green Ninja Stealth. It would be delivered to Lyons, and it would include up to around 3 hours of staff training. University of Colorado is using this, Lafayette, Louisville, and Denver University has a couple of them. So in the event of the selection of this award, the EAB and the Town of Lyons suspect there would be some opportunity for slight request changes to the funding to make it most useful for the Town of Lyons. And then Cam Mitchell would be the one to finalize the proposal once the BOT provides the go-ahead on this matching grant request. I'm open for questions, and so I have Robert also in addition to us here and open for questions.
Are there any questions? Trustee Lowe.
Thanks, Mayor. Steve, great presentation. Thanks for the information. I don't see anything adverse in this applying for this grant, but I would like you or Bob to quantify the in-kind match that you're looking for. Did I hear that right? That it was $76,140 to $82,250 was the range of in-kind donations, and what would that comprise?
This is where I'll let Bob. He has a pretty good detailed spreadsheet on the itemized components to create that summation.
Sure.
Sure. Let me locate the spreadsheet here. So the actual this of course is just a draft budget, has to be finalized by Kim Mitchell and Dave Cosgrove and others. But at present, it's showing $76,140 for the budget request. So that would be the grant. And then we have a set of possible in-kind itemized cost share. Includes the Weed Posse volunteer hours, 350 hours from them. There's other items. I could run through them. There, any town staff hours that were spent in support of the specifics of this project, which we really haven't detailed for you yet, but much of this has to do with control of the famous myrtle spurge, which is an A-listed species and which is, because, you know, it's on the A list because the state of Colorado desires that municipalities and other jurisdictions plan for eradication of the species, not just control. So it's a very high priority weed, and we have a lot of it in Lyons, and the weed posse and the other volunteers have spent a lot of time hand pulling this weed. So in-kind itemization, their hours, any staff time that could be included in a cost share, EAB field education workshops, even winter storage, maintenance for the steam machine, insurance costs for the steam machine, diesel fuel for the weed machine, if there's money spent on a prison labor contract, and et cetera, items like that. This is work to be done, but we have a rough number for these lines, and think we can get pretty easily to the total of the required total of $76,140. It's a
Bob, is that
relatively modest
spreadsheet something
grant.
you can put up?
It has to be modest because we don't desire any town revenues to be spent. It should be a grant that is fully matched by in-kind expenses by Town of Lyons.
So the 76,140 could be reduced if you're not able to match it with in kind. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's
Okay.
exactly right.
Okay, so I'd like to ask Director Cosgrove if he sees any downside to applying for this grant, and if we were to win it, what sort of burden would that place on his department?
Well, certainly it hasn't been finalized yet. Obviously, the staff just got heavily involved at the end of last week as far as conversations with the EAB and the premise of the grant, but the ask for the grant is mainly for the steam machine itself, and then two positions, one a weed mapping specialist at a quarter time with benefits, and a weed volunteer coordinator for a minimal amount of hours without benefits, part-time position. The other asks are for helping to support and fund some organic weed mitigation products that staff has been researching over the course of this year and has even tried in some piloted areas of parks. And then also a product called Nutrifix that the EAB has been researching, and I have actually been discussing a little bit with Boulder County Parks and Open Space that they've been using on some of their open space areas to combat mainly cheatgrass, but it has other benefits as well, excuse me, for soil. And we've put a number in here to basically test that on up to about 5 acres of property that would probably be most beneficial to try on a couple of our buyout properties that are experiencing quite a bit of that same issue that we're seeing on some of the Boulder County open space properties. You know, I think the biggest challenges would be finding people to apply for those positions, with some of the difficulties we're having just filling our own positions. And then it would be a management and bandwidth issue. All of these things would be great to have, but you know, we are struggling staffing wise ourselves. And so, you know, just having the machine is one thing, but then, you know, having staff available to actually utilize it and utilize it to the extent that I think the EAB would like to see it be used is another.
Well, thanks for that insight, Dave. I can't, like I say, if this steam machine, from what I've heard as a liaison to the ecology board, the steam machine would be especially useful in areas like the rockscape, the pathways that we have, any place that was intended to be bare ground or weed free that didn't have turf, you could use this machine. I think this is a great opportunity, and I'm all for approving, going ahead and applying for this grant. The time is of the essence. It has to be in on the 17th, as I understand.
Further comments? How are the organics working, David?
Mixed results. They seem to have an immediate result. And the application rates seem to be higher, but they do work. They work well on certain weed species over others. I think we're still going to have to continue to work with Boulder County on weed specific products and continued targeting. One thing that would be great is mapping, having mapping and GIS for the town of these different areas and where the species sit, so that we know what methods we want to utilize in those areas to eradicate, especially those A and B listed species. And we may have to go to some chemical control, if we get that guidance. Some of these species just take a combination of different methods to be successful.
I mean, if it's true that we can match without having to outlay any funds, I don't object, to be perfectly honest with you, but I'd like to make sure that's the case. Trustee Rogan.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation and the information. So we talk about in kind from the town, and when it comes to staff hours, that actually does come at a cost. So, it's time that staff will spend on this that they won't be doing another part of their job. So I'm just curious, Administrator Simonson, if you have had a chance to think about the impact that this would have on current staff.
I have not seen what they have provided other than what's you received today as well. So that is something Director Cosgrove and I will look at together.
Okay.
As we review the.
Thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Are we doing comments now or questions?
Whatever you prefer, sir. You go. You have the floor.
Yeah, I saw this proposal for the first time late this afternoon. It was the first detail I'd heard. It was in the works. It's the first details I'd seen of it. It doesn't look like to me that it's a no cost situation to the town. I've heard you've got to interview people and hire them for positions. You've got to track their hours at some point. You've got to pay people to run the steam machine. I've heard insurance costs for it. Certainly add to the town payroll administration. I don't think it's a cost-free proposal. And to receive it at late in the afternoon on the day we actually approved the budget, to me, is just not enough time for. It should have been done as part of the budget process, and I understand the EAB didn't know about it at that time, but to me, it's just not enough notice, and there's too many questions to approve on this short of a notice. Creating 2 new staff positions and an unknown amount of staff costs. So I would encourage it to be considered. I understand this is an ongoing program with the state. I'd encourage it to be considered as part of next year's budget process when we typically talk about adding staff positions, not just after we've approved the budget. So I can't support it at this time. I applaud the effort, and I think it needs more study before we finally approve it.
Further comments? Go ahead, sir.
Thanks, Steve and Bob. Nice seeing you guys again. I do have the same concerns, Trustee Rogan and Mayor Pro Tem Browning brought up about non-cost. Nothing's really a non-cost, especially over the last 24 months that Victoria and her directors had to deal with staffing. But I also know we have other commissions that are chomping on us as a board. So somewhat of a more sarcastic statement would be, we're going to burn diesel fuel, which the SFC doesn't want us to do, to kill weeds. You could just use propane tanks with the torches that a lot of homeowners use, and propane burns a lot cleaner than diesel. So I'm just bringing that up. But no, I do understand the process that clearing those paths with steam would be fairly fast and economical, but it doesn't come at a true non-cost to us. Dave, you had mentioned mapping. I think Greg has, and I think Steve, you all did. And hiring someone to map where our weeds are. Well, the state has a pretty good ag department up at CSU. I would imagine there's gotta be students that are looking for some kind of credit for whether it's a master's program, thesis, something that, you know, actually coming to a town and learning how to actually map and work GIS and put something together. I would like to think we could work with CSU. The Extension Service has something out there they could find us a body or two to spend some time, spring, summer, fall, whenever, to take care of that for staff in the AB. And I know the AB and then the weed posse has some great people that could actually help these individuals around town, but I have no idea if that's an option or not, but it just sounds like it, that could use a little more looking into also.
Further comments? Trustee Miller?
Just like to concur with the rest of my colleagues.
Anybody else have a comment? Trustee Lowe, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm
Go ahead, sir.
good now. I'm just wondering if the quarter time, what was it, a coordinator position and the mapping position, if those were not part of this grant, would that be more amenable to my fellow trustees?
Mayor Pro Tem.
It would to me. I mean, I have concerns. I think staff positions should only be created when absolutely necessary, and I'm not convinced these are necessary. So, and to me, that's a lot of the cost is supervising and hiring and documenting staff hours and that type of thing. So, in terms of, yeah, if existing staff can, if this gets a steam machine and existing staff can operate the steam machine, I don't see much of a cost to that, but I do in adding 2 staff positions.
David, what's your answer to that? Do you have staff that you, I don't know whether you can get everything you need to get done with what you have in the positions you can't fill? Just be honest with us. Do you think that if we got a steam machine, you could be effective with it?
I would commit to be as effective as I can be. Is that an answer?
You're the politician here.
I'm hoping that we will be able to, I'm hoping as we go into the first quarter, particularly with the bringing on of HR specialists, that we'll be able to get some more people hired on in those full-time positions. And I think seasonally, last year, I think was a good example of having a successful local seasonal hiring. I think, and then with proper training, I think that yes, we'll be able to become more effective in its use.
I can't delineate the direction that the board wants to go on this. Mayor Pro Tem, could you start this discussion, please?
The aspects of the grant, other than creating these two new staff positions, I don't have a problem with it. I mean, if we get a steam machine and it has some value, good. I mean, if Dave's able to fill out his staff and they've got time to use it, great. If not, I guess it sits in the shed. But that, I don't think that costs anything if it was grant, if it's supplied by the grant. So I don't have a problem with that aspect of it. But I'm not opposed. I'm not in favor of a proposal on short notice that includes two new
Staff members.
staff positions.
Trustee Waugh?
I think I couldn't have said it better than that. I think it's a good idea. I think it's late. I know they did find out about it late, but at the same time, it just there's too much here at the 11th, well, literally almost the 11th hour. So,
Trustee Careless.
I'll agree with Trustee Wong and Mayor Pro Tem. Without the two positions, I can stomach it more a little bit faster and easier at this time, and hope for the best with staffing locally with students as long as the machine is safe. But then again, our young staff was working chippers and shredders, so it's if we can get them trained and we get some extra staff, that'd be great.
Trustee Miller.
I have nothing more to add than what they've already said.
Okay. Trustee Rogan.
I agree. I'm a little hesitant because I have not had a chance to read the materials that were sent over late this afternoon. So, I'll just say that I trust staff to do a great job on the grant and to alert us if there's any flags that we need to be aware of.
Good, David. I hope you get a steam machine, and I hope you get to use it, and I hope it kills weeds really effectively. So I think, and staff, keep us updated if anything changes, please.
Can we press our clothes with that thing too?
Pardon me?
Can we press our clothes with that thing too? Steam our clothes, get the wrinkles out?
He's asking steam clothes with it, like your suits, Mayor.
Oh, boy.
If we charge, we can pay for it.
Oh, boy.
I'll pay to steam a suit to see the mayor wear a suit personally.
Hey. Okay. Trustee Lowe.
Yeah, just one more thing. Before we go forward with this and give them the high sign to do it, I want to make sure with Chairman Sims and Mr. Breckenridge that the grant can still go through without those two positions that they noted.
We will have to look into that.
Yeah. If you can do it, fine. If you can't do it, we're going to have to figure out something else, because that's the direction of the Board of Trustees. Okay?
Fair enough. We appreciate your time and consideration.
We appreciate your positions on the commission, Steve and Bob. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Okay. Madam Clerk, could you please read the next item into the record?
Yes, the next item is discussion and direction on potential projects to be funded by the Scholl Foundation.
Madam Administrator.
Thank you. Well, we'll keep this one fun and light. So the Scholl Foundation, as you guys know, through my memo, donated $250,000 to Lyons individual assistance after the flood. And they recently had their Board of Trustees come to the area for one of their meetings. This is a national board, actually international board. And they came here to visit and were very moved by our community story, how highly we were impacted, and basically said, we would like to just give you a $25,000 check to do something for your community that would just bring some joy. And so they said, we don't want it to be infrastructure, but we do want you to, we want to send you the check before the end of December. So as well as that, they also invited us to apply for their 2022 and potentially 2023 grant cycle for a larger, either a phased project or another type of project that fits within their mission and goals. So staff are just needing some guidance from the board on what feel-good project they would like us to submit to them so that they can send us a $25,000 check. They said at this point, they just want to know how we're going to use it. It doesn't have to be done by then. So, so on my staff memo, I think we came up with about a dozen different things, as some ideas from talking with their board members of what were important to them. And so I just want to have the board discuss this and give staff direction on which one of these you'd like us to pursue.
I'd like it to go to the smaller dog park and get it done. That's feel good. Doesn't that feel good?
Oh, I think it would, yeah, it was on my list as a.
I know. I mean, if we're gonna submit what we were talking about, we might as well have the water and have it done correctly. Mayor Pro Tem?
I think we appropriated some parks fund money for that, but I have some couple of comments. A couple of these items on the staff list caught my eye because they triggered some prior discussions and ideas that board members had come up with. And the two in particular were the 4th Avenue Bridge, public art or personalization of Lyons style, and accents along the new safe routes to school trail. In separate discussions at various times in the last year with different board members, namely Trustee Caravas and Trustee Rogan, and occasionally with the mayor, ideas were thrown out about potentially naming the new 4th Avenue Bridge after a deserving Lyons citizens, and the pathway that would go along with that. And the people who were brought up for potentially honoring with bridge naming and pathway naming, whereas to the bridge, David and Janet Orbach, who are the mainstays of the Confluence neighborhood and who are and were, in Janet's case, responsible for many of the people returning to the Confluence after the flood, which is something that I think would fit well with what the Shoal Foundation has already funded in terms of flood recovery here, and I think would stand us well with future applications with them. David and Janet's families have been around here a long time and have done many things for the community, including maintaining the cemetery with their own personal uncompensated efforts for years and years. And I think when you talk about personalizing a project, I think that would, in terms of how you would do that and how you would decorate it or add tile work or plaques or whatever you would do, we've got a very active LAHC who I think could come up with some particulars on how to implement that. I'm not good at that kind of stuff. And then there's the pathway that would go from the park through the Confluence up to the school. And I think Trustee Rogan was the first one who suggested honoring this person, and I readily agreed with her on this. I think it ought to be named the Crystal Pathway after Crystal White, who again donated hours and hours and hours of uncompensated labor for the flood recovery effort and continues to do great work for the town and tackling projects that nobody else will tackle. And I think if we devoted this grant money to also accenting a crystal pathway and decorating a bridge named after the Orbachs, I can't think of anything that would bring more joy, in the words that were used, to the community than honoring those people in that way. And that's my suggestion. And I will say I did talk about that individually, not collectively, with Trustee Rogan and Trustee Caravas, and I would invite any comments they had to make in that respect.
Trustee Rogan?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I agree with Mayor Pro Tem. You know, in thinking about this list, I thought about, well, what would bring the greatest good to the greatest number of residents, right? And I appreciate the small dog park thing, but that's for a select group, a self-selected group of people who have small dogs. But this, I think, particularly if we involve the LAHC and maybe we can find a way to involve the kids at the elementary school to help co-create this, or the middle and high school, I think it could be a great townwide project that would leave a lasting impression and bring a lot of joy.
Trustee Miller, you had your hand up.
My mind always just goes back to the kids not having anything to do here in town. Besides the skate park, which is continually vandalized. But you know, we talked about during budget the pump track needing to be rebuilt. And I can't remember how much. I guess it wasn't very much money that it was going to cost to redo that. But I was just thinking maybe we could use some of the money potentially to rebuild that, because that pump track has been used and used and used and used and used and used by a lot of kids. And it's pretty missed right now by them. That was prior to the skate park, of course, which is also used by many children, but the two of them together could potentially be great for Lyons kids.
Mayor Pro Tem?
If Trustee Miller, if you mean the dirt bike park, the jump park, yeah, that's in the budget already to be funded as a capital project next year to redo that and include the pump track part of it as an improvement, basically for kids. There was another related idea about using the 10 acres south of the dog park and putting in a new kind of kids beginner mountain bike park, but that's something the PRC is looking at kind of long term, because it would require probably amending the IGA or the agreement with Boulder County on that. But the improvements in the renovation of the dirt bike jump park, whatever it's called, that's already in the budget. We got that in there. So
okay, do we have any idea how much it costs for the lights at the ball fields?
Oh, the lights at the ball field will be up at near $1 million with.
Okay, I thought it was more than 25,000.
500,000 or something.
Any other comments? Trustee Lowell.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning sunk his putt on that. I can't see a better use for this money, especially if we get the arts people involved in it, have some sort of plaques, monuments, maybe some lighting on the bridge or something like that. But I think that's a wonderful suggestion, and I think everybody's going to use that bridge when it's built. Everybody's going to see it, so it's definitely a great community uplifting project.
Further comments? Trustee Caravas.
I'll agree with Mayor Pro Tem Browning, Trustee Lowell, and Rogan. As I spent, I believe it was approximately January 2014 with the Lyons volunteers, working day in, day out, weekend, week out, year in, year out with Crystal, slinging mud, slinging this, moving that, carrying, hammering, working. Was always there, always willing to work, always helping bring other volunteers in. Endlessly, is not afraid to do any kind of work, no matter how strong or how hard the work was going to be. Dave, coming from knowing he's a commercial plumber in retirement, working with all the people in the Confluence area, not charging him his time, his materials to work and get those houses, help us get the residents back, the groups we brought in to help rebuild these homes, working with them continuously. I can't even say the words to thank him for what he did and how much he saved in monies and time for these people. And Jan and them opening up their house to everybody to meet. Yes, there was, headbutting here and there, but you know what? Here we are, we're rebuilding. It took everybody to get it done. And someone that's been a part of this community this long, more than deserves something like that for both people, both Crystal and the Orbach.
Any other comments? I think you have the opinion of the Board of Trustees, Administrator Simonson.
Okay.
And I'll just say for the record that Janet is a Brackett, and Bracketts were one of the very, very first families in Lyons. Okay. Discussion for future agenda items. Does anybody have any future agenda items they would like to see placed on the agenda? Oh, it is truly getting late. Mayor
Is there-
Pro Tem?
I mentioned one earlier, but that's all I have. Nothing additional.
Okay.
Is there any interest in discussing water shares? Or not at this time?
No, not at this time. No other future agenda items? Summary of action items? Madam Clerk?
Yep, I've got number one, address the SFC and give general direction to boards and commissions on roles and responsibilities by Mayor Pro Tem. Number two, submit a letter of request to be on the list for renewable energy to Maine. Three, update the two budget resolutions, 2021, 124 and 125 with the amendments that were made. 5, ordinances 1112 and 1113 second hearings to be held sometime in January to allow for more time. The next one is to draft the ordinance to remove the PUD requirement for Lyons Youth Highway LLC, Mr. Tamburello. Number 7 is the EAB is to pursue the weed mitigation grant without the 2 staff positions if time allows for it. And the last one was the bridge and trail dedications for the Scholl Foundation.
Administrator Simonson, anything to add?
The only thing was and maybe you said this and I missed it, the dates on, following up on what the dates are for anything to be submitted on the ballot.
Oh, yes.
That's all.
Counselor?
And draft an ordinance to waive the requirement for Paul Tamburello to submit a PUD.
Yep, that's on there.
Yes, you got that. All right, is that it? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe.